In the shadowy halls of Hawthorne Manor, a cryptic locket hides a fortune. But a killer lurks, poisoning Sir Reginald to claim it. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels Latin clues, secret passages, and deadly betrayals. As a new threat emerges to burn the manor, Poirot sets traps, unmasks the cunning butler Grayson, and exposes a greedy scholar's plot. Can he outwit the shadows to save the gold and bring justice? Dive into a thrilling mystery of greed, deception, and triumph. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Chapter 1. The Mysterious Invitanth. Rain tapped gently on the window of Hercule Poirot's cozy London apartment, like tiny fingers begging to come inside. It was a grey afternoon in early autumn, the kind that made a man want to stay by the fire with a cup of hot chocolate. Poirot, however, was not a man to laze about. His neat moustache twitched as he read a letter, his sharp green eyes scanning the words with care. The letter lay on his polished desk, its thick paper crinkled from travel. It was from someone named Sir Reginald Hawthorne, a name Poirot had heard whispered in rich circles, but never met. Monsieur Hastings, Poirot called, his voice crisp but kind. "Come, my friend. This is most curious." Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend, poked his head into the room. He was a tall man with a friendly face, his brown hair a bit messy from running his fingers through it. He wore a tweed jacket, looking every bit the Englishman who loved a good adventure. "What's got you so excited, Poirot?" he asked, stepping inside. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm shadows on the walls. Poirot held up the letter, his fingers delicate as if handling a rare jewel. "This, Hastings, a plea for help from a man who fears his fortune is in danger. And not just any fortune, a hidden one, locked away by a secret code." Hastings' eyes widened. A secret code. Sounds like something out of a boy's adventure book. "Perhaps," Poirot said, a small smile playing on his lips. "But Sir Reginald is no boy. He is a millionaire, living in a grand house called Hawthorne Manor. He writes that his father, a man who loved puzzles, hid a great treasure somewhere on his estate. Only a code can find it. And now Sir Reginald believes someone in his home wants to steal it." Hastings plopped into a chair, leaning forward. "Steal it? Who? That mon ami is the mystery." Poirot tapped the letter. "Sir Reginald invites me to his manor to solve this code before it falls into the wrong hands. He fears for his safety too. This is no simple game, Hastings. There is danger in the air." Hastings grinned. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's pack our bags and catch the next train." Poirot chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Always so eager, Hastings. Very well, we shall go. But first, I must think. The little grey cells, they must prepare." He tapped his temple, meaning his brain, which he trusted more than any tool or weapon. By evening, the two men were on a train chugging through the English countryside. The rain had stopped, but mist clung to the fields, making the world look like a painting smudged with soft greys. Poirot sat by the window, his black coat buttoned neatly, a small notebook in his hand. He jotted down thoughts, his pen moving with quick, precise strokes. Hastings, meanwhile, stared out at the passing trees, his mind already dreaming of treasure and villains. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "what do you know about this Sir Reginald?" Poirot closed his notebook. "Not much, but enough to intrigue Hercule Poirot. Sir Reginald Hawthorne is a man of wealth, made from shipping and trade. He lives alone, save for his household. A nephew, a niece, a butler, and perhaps others. He is not married, and his health, they say, is poor. Such a man, with so much money and so few friends, is a target for greed. Hastings nodded. And this code, do you think it's real? Oh, it is real, Hastings. A man does not write such a letter unless he believes in the danger. Whether the treasure is gold or something else, we shall see. But the code, it is. The key, and Poirot loves a puzzle. The train slowed, puffing steam as it pulled into a small station. A sign read Hawthorne Village. The platform was empty except for a young man in a driver's cap, holding a lantern. He waved as Poirot and Hastings stepped off, their suitcases in hand. "Mr. Poirot, sir?" the driver asked, tipping his cap. "I'm Tom, from the Manor. Sir Reginald sent me to fetch you." "Very good, Tom," Poirot said, his voice polite but firm. "Lead the way." Tom helped with their bags, leading them to a shiny black car parked nearby. The night was cool, the air smelling of damp earth and leaves. As they drove, Tom chatted about the village. Small, quiet, with a church and a pub, but Poirot listened more to what wasn't said. Tom's voice tightened when he mentioned the manor, as if nervous. The car wound up a hill, and soon Hawthorne Manor came into view. It was a massive house, all stone and tall windows, like something from a ghost story. Ivy clung to its walls, and a single light glowed in a tower. The rest of the house seemed dark, as if holding its breath. "Big place," Hastings whispered, his eyes wide. "Oui," Poirot murmured. "And full of secrets, I think." Tom stopped the car at the front steps. A heavy wooden door creaked open, and a man stood there, tall and thin, with grey hair and a stiff posture. His black suit marked him as a butler. "Welcome, Mr. Poirot." "Captain Hastings," the man said, his voice smooth but cold. "I am Grayson, Sir Reginald's butler. Please, come inside." They stepped into a grand hall, its floor gleaming marble, its walls lined with old paintings. A chandelier sparkled above, but the air felt chilly, as if the house didn't welcome guests. Grayson took their coats, his movements precise, like a clock's gears. "Sir Reginald awaits you in the drawing room," Grayson said. "This way." Pure eyes darted around, noting every detail. A dusty vase, a creaky floorboard, a portrait of a stern man who looked like Sir Reginald might have years ago. Hastings followed, his boots echoing in the quiet. The drawing room was warm, a fire roaring in a stone fireplace. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a large window overlooked a garden lost in the dark. Sir Reginald Hawthorne sat in a backed chair, a blanket over his knees. He was old, his face pale and lined, but his blue eyes were sharp, like a hawk's. Beside him stood a young man, handsome but restless, pacing like a caged animal. A young woman sat near the fire, her dark hair pinned up, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Another man, older, with wild grey hair and thick glasses, leaned against a bookshelf, a book in his hand. Mr. Poirot, Sir Reginald's voice, was weak but eager. He tried to stand, but Poirot waved him down. "Rest, Monsieur Poirot," said kindly. "Hercule Poirot is here, and all will be well." Sir Reginald smiled faintly. "I hope so. This is my nephew, Lionel Hawthorne." He gestured to the pacing man, who stopped and nodded curtly. Lionel had sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that didn't meet Poirot's for long. "And my niece, Clara Hawthorne," Sir Reginald continued, nodding at the woman. Clara looked up, her face pretty but tense, like she carried a heavy secret. She murmured a greeting, her voice soft. "And this," Sir Reginald said, pointing to the older man, "is Professor Marlowe, a friend and scholar. He knows about codes and such things." Marlowe bowed slightly, his glasses glinting. "A pleasure, Mr. Poirot. I've heard of your skill." Poirot smiled politely, but his mind was already working. These people, he thought, are not all they seem. "Please, sit, sir," Reginald said, coughing. Grayson poured tea, moving silently, his eyes watching everyone. Poirot took a chair near the fire, Hastings beside him. "You wrote of a code, Sir Reginald," Poirot said, sipping his tea. "Tell me everything." Sir Reginald leaned forward, his hands trembling. "My father, Henry Hawthorne, was a strange man. He loved puzzles, codes, tricks of the mind. When he died, he left me this house and a fortune in gold ore, so he said. But the gold is hidden, locked away by a code only he understood. He gave me this to start." He pulled a chain from his neck, revealing a golden locket, small but heavy. He opened it, showing Poirot an engraving inside, numbers, letters, and odd symbols, like a riddle carved in gold. Poirot took the locket, his fingers tracing the marks. "Most interesting," he murmured. "And you believe this code leads to—" "The gold, I know it does," Sir Reginald said. "But I'm not the only one who knows. Someone in this house wants that gold. They've been searching quietly, at night. I hear footsteps, see shadows, and I fear." His voice dropped. "I fear they'll kill for it." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lionel snorted, crossing his arms. "Uncle, you're imagining things. This is nonsense." "Is it?" Sir Reginald snapped, his eyes flashing. "You've been asking about my will, Lionel. Don't think I haven't noticed." Lionel's face reddened, but he said nothing. Professor Marlowe cleared his throat. "Sir Reginald, perhaps. You're tired. This talk of murder, I'm not tired." Sir Reginald barked, then coughed again. Grayson stepped forward, offering a glass of water, but Sir Reginald waved him away. "Mr. Poirot, I trust you. Find the gold, solve the code, and watch them." He glanced at his family, his voice bitter. "They're not all loyal." Poirot nodded, his face calm but his mind racing. "I shall do so, monsieur. Hercule Poirot does not fail." Grayson spoke, his voice low. "Dinner will be served soon. Shall I show you to your rooms?" "Yes, thank you," Poirot said, standing. He handed the locket back to Sir Reginald, but not before memorizing its symbols. As they left the room, Hastings whispered, "What do you think, Poirot? A real treasure?" "Real or not, Hastings," Poirot said softly, "there is danger. Here, and Poirot will find the truth." Grayson led them upstairs, the staircase wide and creaky. The halls were lined with more paintings, their eyes seeming to follow. Poirot's room was large, with a four-poster bed and a window overlooking the misty garden. Hastings' room was next door, smaller but cozy. Grayson left them, his footsteps fading. "Odd bunch, aren't they?" Hastings said, flopping onto Poirot's bed. "Lionel's shifty, Clara's nervous, and that Marlowe clever for his own good." Poirot smiled, unpacking his suitcase with care. "You see much, Hastings, but not enough. Lionel is angry, yes, but why? Clara hides something, but is it guilt or fear? And Marlowe, his eyes, they watch the locket too closely. As for Grayson, he is too perfect, like a machine." Hastings frowned. "You think they're all in on it?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, hanging his coat. Or perhaps one plays a deeper game. We shall see. Dinner was served in a grand dining room, the table set with silver and crystal. A chandelier glowed above, but the room felt heavy, as if secrets hung in the air. Sir Reginald sat at the head, the locket around his neck glinting. Lionel drank wine, his mood sour. Clara picked at her food, her eyes darting to the door. Marlowe talked about ancient codes, his voice eager, but Poirot noticed he avoided Sir Reginald's gaze. Grayson served silently, his face a mask. The meal was roast beef, potatoes, and peas, simple but rich. Poirot ate slowly, watching everyone. "Sir Reginald," he said, "tell me of your father. Was he always so fond of codes?" Sir Reginald nodded, a sad smile on his face. "Always. He said a man's mind should be sharp, like a sword. He made puzzles for me as a boy, riddles, mazes, codes. This locket was his last gift. He said it would protect me, but also test me." Clara spoke, her voice soft. "Grandfather was kind, but strange. He loved this house. He said it held his heart." Lionel rolled his eyes. "He was mad, you mean, hiding gold like a pirate. And now we're stuck with this nonsense. Enough." "Lionel," Sir Reginald said sharply, "you'd do well to respect your grandfather." Lionel muttered something, draining his glass. Marlowe leaned forward. "Mr. Poirot, have you seen such a code before? It's quite unique." Poirot smiled. "Many codes, monsieur, but each has a logic. This one, I think, is personal. It speaks of family, of trust or mistrust." Sir Reginald coughed, his face pale. "I'm tired," he said suddenly. "Grayson, help me to my room." Grayson moved quickly, supporting Sir Reginald. The others stood, murmuring good nights. Poirot watched Grayson closely, noting how his hands lingered on the old man's arm. Clara excused herself, her face pale. Lionel grabbed the wine bottle and stormed off. Marlowe lingered, offering to show Poirot the library, but Poirot declined, saying he needed rest. Back in his room, Poirot sat by the window, his notebook open. He sketched the locket's symbols, his mind turning like a clock. Hastings burst in, his face excited. "Poirot, I heard something. Footsteps in the hall, then a door creaking." Poirot raised a hand. "Calm, Hastings. This house is old. It speaks at night. But we must listen. Tomorrow we begin. The code, the gold, the danger, they are all here, waiting for Hercule Poirot." Hastings nodded, but his eyes were wide. "I don't like this place, Poirot. It feels wrong. Wrong." "Perhaps," Poirot said, closing his notebook, "but also right for a mystery. Sleep, mon ami. Tomorrow the little grey cells go to work." As Hastings left, Poirot blew out his candle, the room falling dark. Outside, the wind moaned, and somewhere in the manor a floorboard creaked. Poirot smiled into the night. The game had begun. Chapter 2. The code revealed. The morning sun barely reached Hawthorne Manor, its light dimmed by thick clouds that hung over the countryside like a heavy blanket. Hercule Poirot stood at his bedroom window, his sharp green eyes scanning the misty garden below. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet grass and old stone. His neat moustache twitched as he thought about the golden locket Sir Reginald had shown him the night before. Its strange symbols and numbers burned into his memory. He knew today would bring answers, but also danger. A man like Sir Reginald, rich and afraid, did not summon Hercule Poirot for nothing. Monsieur Hastings. Poirot called, his voice crisp but calm. He turned from the window, adjusting his tie with precise fingers. We must be quick. The day begins, and the mystery waits. Captain Hastings stumbled into the room, his brown hair sticking up from sleep, his tweed jacket wrinkled. "Poirot, it's barely dawn," he grumbled, rubbing his eyes. "What's the rush? That locket business can wait for breakfast, surely." Poirot shook his head, a small smile on his lips. "Nan, mon ami, in a house like this, time is not our friend. Sir Reginald fears for his life, and Hercule Poirot does not ignore such fears. Come, we go to the dining room." Hastings sighed but followed, grabbing his coat. The manor was quiet as they descended the grand staircase, its wooden steps creaking under their weight. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself held secrets in its walls. Paintings of stern-faced Hawthorne ancestors watched them pass, their eyes seeming to follow every step. Poirot noticed a faint scratch on the banister, fresh and sharp, as if someone had dragged something heavy in the night. He filed it away. In his mind, his little grey cells already at work. The dining room was as grand as the night before, its long table set with silver and porcelain. The chandelier above sparkled, but the room was cold, the fire in the hearth reduced to glowing embers. Grayson, the butler, stood by the sideboard, pouring coffee. His face was a mask, his movements smooth but careful, like a man who knew he was being watched. Clara Hawthorne sat at the table, her dark hair pinned tightly, her hands folded in. Her lap, she looked pale, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting someone or something. Lionel Hawthorne, the nephew, slouched in a chair, sipping coffee with a scowl. Professor Marlowe, the scholar, was absent. "Good morning, Mr. Poirot." "Captain Hastings," Grayson said, his voice low and polite. "Breakfast is ready. Sir Reginald will join us soon." Poirot nodded, taking a seat. "Merci, Grayson. And where's Professor Marlowe?" Grayson hesitated, just for a moment. "He is in the library, sir. He rose early to study some books." "Books, you say?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting. And Sir Reginald, he is well." Clara spoke, her voice soft but strained. "Uncle was tired last night. He's not young, you know. He often sleeps late." Lionel snorted, setting his cup down hard. "Tired. He's obsessed with that locket and his father's nonsense. Keeps us all on edge with his talk of thieves and murderers." "Lionel, please," Clara said, her fingers tightening. "He's our uncle. Show some respect. Respect." Lionel laughed, his voice sharp. "For a man who hoards gold, like a dragon, and won't share a penny. I'm tired of this game." Poirot watched them closely, his face calm but his mind racing. Lionel's anger was real, but was it greed or something deeper? Clara's nervousness hinted at secrets, but were they hers or someone else's? And Grayson, his silence was too perfect. Like a man hiding behind a curtain, the door opened and Professor Marlowe entered, his grey hair wild, his glasses slipping down his nose. He carried a thick book, its cover worn leather. "Good morning," he said, nodding to Poirot. "I found something in the library, a book on codes. It might help with the locket." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You work quickly, monsieur. Most commendable. We shall look at this book after breakfast." Marlowe smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He sat, opening the book and pretending to read, though Poirot noticed his fingers trembled slightly. The meal began: eggs, toast, and sausages, simple but filling. Poirot ate slowly, his eyes moving from face to face. The room was quiet, save for the clink of silverware and the distant howl of wind outside. Sir Reginald's chair at the head of the table remained empty. "Grayson," Poirot said, setting down his fork, "is Sir Reginald often so late?" Grayson paused, a coffee pot in his hand. "Not usually, sir. I'll check on him." He left, his footsteps echoing in the hall. Clara stared at her plate, her fork still. Lionel muttered something under his breath, pouring more coffee. Marlowe turned a page, but Poirot saw he wasn't reading. Minutes passed, heavy and slow. Then a shout rang out, a sharp, panicked cry from upstairs. Hastings jumped to his feet. "That's Grayson." Poirot was already moving, his small frame surprisingly quick. "Come, Hastings," he called, hurrying out the door. The others followed, Clara's face white, Lionel cursing, Marlowe clutching his book like a shield. They raced up the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. Grayson stood outside Sir Reginald's room, his face pale, his hands shaking. He's dead," he stammered. "Sir Reginald, he's gone." Poirot pushed past him, entering the room. Sir Reginald lay on his bed, his eyes open, his face frozen in a look of shock. The golden locket hung around his neck, its chain tangled in his fingers. A glass of water sat on the bedside table, its contents cloudy. The room smelled faintly of almonds, a smell Poirot knew too well. "Poison," Poirot said, his voice steady but grave. He leaned over the body, his eyes sharp. "Cyanide, I think. Quick and cruel." Clara gasped, clutching the doorframe. "No, it can't be." Lionel stared, his jaw tight. "Who did this? Who?" Marlowe stepped back, his book falling to the floor. "This is terrible," he whispered. Hastings grabbed Poirot's arm. "What do we do?" Poirot turned, his face like stone. "We find the truth, Hastings. Sir Reginald was murdered, and the killer is in this house. The locket, the code, the fortune, they are all part of this. Hercule Poirot will not rest until justice is done." He knelt by the bed, examining the locket. Its symbols gleamed in the dim light, mocking him with their mystery. He checked Sir Reginald's hands. No marks, no struggle. The poison was in the water, he was sure. But who had given it to him, and when? "Grayson," Poirot said, standing, "who brought Sir Reginald his water last night?" Grayson swallowed, his eyes flickering. "I did, sir, as always. But it was clean, I swear it." Poirot nodded, but his gaze was sharp. "We shall see. Hastings, fetch the police. This is murder, and we must act quickly." Hastings nodded, rushing out. Clara sank into a chair, tears in her eyes. Lionel paced, his hands clenched. Marlowe picked up his book, holding it tightly. Grayson stood still, his face unreadable. Poirot moved to the bedside table, lifting the glass with a handkerchief. He sniffed it, confirming the almond-like scent. "Cyanide is not easy to get," he said softly. "The killer planned this. But why now? And why show me the locket first?" Clara looked up, her voice shaking. "Uncle trusted you, Mr. Poirot. He said you'd solve the code. Maybe the killer wanted you here." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A clever thought, mademoiselle. Perhaps the killer wished to challenge Hercule Poirot. If so, they will regret it." The police arrived within the hour, led by Inspector Japp, a gruff man with a moustache almost as fine as Poirot's. He knew Poirot well and trusted his skill, though he often teased him for his fussy ways. "Poison, eh?" Japp said, inspecting the body. Nasty business. Any ideas, Poirot? Many, Inspector Poirot said, his voice calm. But first, we must secure the locket. It is the heart of this mystery. Japp nodded, ordering his men to search the room. They found no poison, no hidden vials, but Poirot noticed something else, a small notebook under Sir Reginald's pillow, its pages filled with numbers and sketches. He slipped it into his pocket before anyone saw, knowing it might hold clues to the code. The household gathered in the drawing-room, the air thick with fear and suspicion. Japp questioned each person, but Poirot listened more to their silences than their words. Grayson claimed he'd left Sir Reginald alive at 10 o'clock. Clara said she'd seen her uncle in the hall, looking tired but well. Lionel admitted he'd argued with Sir Reginald about money, but swore he'd never hurt him. Marlowe said he'd been in the library all evening, reading about codes. Codes, always codes, Japp muttered, rubbing his temple. What's this locket business, Poirot? Poirot held up the locket, taken from Sir Reginald's neck with Japp's permission. This, Inspector, is the key to a fortune. Sir Reginald's father hid gold somewhere in this manor, protected by a code carved here. Someone killed to keep that secret or to steal it. Japp frowned. So we've got a murderer and a treasure hunter. Same person, perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Or perhaps the killer wishes us to think so. We must look deeper. He turned to the group, his voice sharp. No one leaves this house until Hercule Poirot finds the truth. The locket stays with me. The code I will solve. And the killer I will catch. Clara shivered. Lionel glared. Marlowe adjusted his glasses, and Grayson bowed slightly, his face blank. Japp posted a constable at the door, ensuring no one could slip away. As the police continued their search, Poirot took Hastings to the library, a vast room filled with books from floor to ceiling. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, and the air smelled of leather and old paper. Marlowe's book lay open on a table, its pages marked with notes about ciphers. Hastings, Poirot said, handing him the locket, look at these numbers. Do they remind you of anything? Hastings squinted, his brow furrowed. They're just numbers, Poirot, 17, 42, 8. And those squiggly symbols could be anything. Poirot smiled. To you, perhaps. But to Hercule Poirot, they are a map. Look here. He opened Marlowe's book, pointing to a page about book ciphers, where numbers point to specific words in a text. These numbers may match pages or lines in a book in this library. We must find it. Hastings grinned, excited. A treasure hunt. I'll start checking shelves. Carefully, mon ami, Poirot warned. The killer watches us, and the code is not the only danger. They spent hours searching, pulling books, and scanning pages. Poirot found a volume of poetry, its pages yellowed, with a number 17 written in the margin. The line on page 17 read, "The rose blooms where shadows fall." He paused, his mind turning. A rose, could it be a clue to the manor's garden, where a stone statue stood? Before he could share this with Hastings, Clara entered, her face pale. "Mr. Poirot, I need to talk to you." Alone, Hastings frowned but stepped outside. Clara closed the door, her hands trembling. Earlier, she whispered. "I saw someone in Uncle's room last night. Not Grayson, a shadow moving by the window. I was too scared to say anything." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "A shadow, mademoiselle. Describe it." "It was tall, quick. I couldn't see the face, but they were holding something, maybe a bottle. She bit her lip. I think Uncle was already poisoned then. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. You did well to tell me, Clara. Say nothing to the others. Trust Hercule Poirot. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and left. Hastings returned, looking curious. What was that about? A clue, Hastings, Poirot said, pocketing the poetry book. And a warning. The killer is close, and they are bold. We must move quickly. As evening fell, the manor grew darker, its halls filled with shadows. Poirot sat by the fire, the locket in his hand, its symbols catching the light. He opened Sir Reginald's notebook, finding more numbers and a sketch of a rose. The clue was clear now. The rose was key. But the poison, the shadow, the motives, they swirled in his mind like a storm. Hastings, he said, his voice low, tomorrow we search the garden. The rose will speak. But tonight we watch. The killer will not rest, and neither will Poirot. Hastings nodded, his face serious. This place gives me the creeps, Poirot, but I'm with you. Poirot smiled, his eyes bright. Good, mon. And me, for in this game of shadows, Hercule Poirot will find the light. Chapter 3. The First Clue. Morning after Sir Reginald's murder dawned cold and grey. The sky over Hawthorne Manor heavy with clouds that seemed to press down on the old house. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his black coat buttoned tightly, his sharp green eyes scanning the marble floor and towering paintings. The air smelled of dust and wax, and the silence was thick, broken only by the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. His neat moustache twitched as he thought of the golden locket, now safely in his pocket, its cryptic symbols a puzzle that teased his little grey cells. Sir Reginald's death was no accident poisoned by cyanide, a cruel and calculated act. The killer was in this house, and Poirot knew the code held the key to both the fortune and the murderer's identity. Monsieur Hastings. Poirot called, his voice sharp but calm, echoing in the hall. We have work to do. The truth does not wait for lazy feet. Captain Hastings appeared from the dining room, a piece of toast in his hand, his brown hair still messy from sleep. His tweed jacket was slightly askew, but his eyes were bright with excitement. Poirot, you're up early, he said, swallowing quickly. I thought we'd at least have tea before diving into this mess. Poirot smiled, a small, knowing curve of his lips. Tea, mon ami, is for later. Now we hunt. The locket speaks of a rose, and the notebook of Sir Reginald hints at the same. We begin in the library, where books may hide more than words. Hastings nodded, brushing crumbs from his jacket. Right, the library. That poetry book you found last night, the rose blooms where shadows fall, sounds like a clue to me. Indeed, Poirot said, turning toward the library's heavy oak doors, but a clue is only a thread. We must weave the tapestry. Come. The library was a cavern of knowledge, its high shelves packed with books, their spines faded from years of neglect. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. The air smelled of old leather and ink, and a faint chill lingered, as if the room held secrets it wasn't ready to share. Poirot moved to the table where Professor Marlowe had left his book on ciphers, its pages still open. Hastings began pulling books from the shelves, checking for more numbers or marks like those in Sir Reginald's notebook. Careful, Hastings, Poirot warned, his eyes scanning the room. We seek a book that matches the locket's numbers, 17, 42, 8. But we also watch for signs of the killer. They know we are close. Hastings paused, a thick volume in his hands. You think the murderer's been in here, looking for the same thing? Poirot nodded, his fingers tracing the locket symbols through his pocket. Sir Reginald was killed to silence him or to steal the fortune. The library is the heart of this puzzle. The killer has been here, I am sure. As they searched, the manor stirred to life. Grayson, the butler, moved silently through the halls, his black suit blending with the shadows. Clara Hawthorne lingered in the drawing room, her face pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Lionel Hawthorne stomped about, his voice loud as he argued with a constable about being trapped in the house. Professor Marlowe, meanwhile, had slipped out early, claiming he needed air, but Poirot suspected he was avoiding questions. An hour into their search, Hastings called out, "Poirot, look at this." He held up a slim book, its cover a deep green, titled Gardens of England. On page 17, a line was underlined in faint pencil. "The rose of stone guards the heart." Beside it, in the margin, was the number 42. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Magnifique, Hastings. This is no coincidence. The rose again, and 42 perhaps another page or a clue to follow. He flipped to page 42, finding a detailed drawing of a rose garden with a note in the same handwriting, "Beneath the stone, the truth lies." Poirot's mind raced. The manor's garden had a stone statue of a rose, half hidden by ivy. Could it be the key to the code? Before he could speak, the library door creaked open. Clara stood there, her eyes wide. "Mr. Poirot, I heard you were here. I need to tell you something." Poirot gestured to a chair. "Speak, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot listens." Hastings set the book down, watching Clara closely. She sat, her hands trembling. "It's about Uncle's notebook. I saw him writing in it 2 nights ago. He was muttering about the rose and someone watching him. He was scared, Mr. Poirot. I should have said something sooner." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "And why did you not, Clara?" She looked down, her cheeks flushing. "I was afraid. Lionel's been so angry, and Grayson. He's always watching. And that Professor Marlowe, he's not what he seems. I don't trust anyone." Poirot nodded, his eyes sharp. "You did well to speak now. Tell me, did Sir Reginald mention the garden?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Once, he said grandfather loved the rose garden. It was his heart, he called it." "Mercy," Poirot said, standing. "You have helped more than you know. Now, go. Say nothing of this." Clara left, her footsteps soft but quick. Hastings frowned. "She's hiding something, Poirot. I can feel it." "Perhaps," Poirot said, picking up the green book. "But fear hides truth as often as lies do. We go to the garden now. The rose of stone awaits." They stepped outside, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth. The garden was a tangle of roses, their petals drooping under the morning mist. At its center stood a stone statue, a rose carved with delicate detail, its petals chipped by time. Ivy curled around its base, hiding part of the stone. Poirot knelt, his gloved hands brushing the dirt. He tapped the base, listening for a hollow sound. "Hastings," he said, "fetch a trowel." "We dig." Hastings ran to the shed, returning with a small shovel. They worked carefully, the earth cold and damp. After a few minutes, Hastings' trowel hit something harder, metal box. Rusted but intact, buried shallowly beneath the statue. Poirot lifted it, his fingers steady despite the excitement in his eyes. "Mon ami," he said, "the first clue." The box was locked, its surface etched with more symbols matching the locket. Poirot opened it with a small tool from his pocket, revealing a folded paper and a tiny key. The paper was written in Latin, its words neat but cryptic. "Rosa in lapide silet verum." Poirot translated softly, "The rose and stone hides the truth." Hastings grinned. "We're getting somewhere, Poirot. What's the key for?" Poirot held it up, its brass glinting. "A lock, perhaps. But where? The manor is full of secrets. We must keep this safe." As they stood, a shadow moved near the garden wall. Hastings spun, his hand on his coat pocket. "Who's there?" he called. No answer came, but footsteps crunched on gravel, fading quickly. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The killer watches. Hastings, they know we are close." They returned to the manor, the box hidden under Poirot's coat. In the library, Poirot spread the paper on the table, studying the Latin. "This is no simple code," he said. "It points to another step. The rose, the stone, the key, all pieces of a puzzle Sir Reginald's father built." Hastings paced, his boots scuffing the floor. "But who poisoned him, Poirot? Lionel's got motive money, Clara's acting strange, and Grayson's too quiet. Marlowe's up to something with his books." Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping. "The locket, all true, mon ami. But we must not jump like the frog. We observe, we think. The little grey cells will find the path." The door opened and Inspector Japp entered, his face grim. "Poirot, we've got a problem. The groundskeeper, Tom, says he saw someone in the garden last night, near that statue. He's scared stiff, won't talk unless you're there." Poirot stood, his eyes bright. "Then we speak to Tom. He may have seen our shadow." They found Tom in the kitchen, a wiry man with nervous hands, sipping tea under Grayson's watchful eye. Japp sat across from him, his notebook open. "Tell Mr. Poirot what you told me, Tom." Tom swallowed, glancing at Grayson, who stood by. "The door, it was late, sir, near midnight. I was checking the sheds when I saw someone by the rose statue. Tall, moving quick. They were digging, I think, but they ran when they heard me." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but sharp. "And this person, Tom, did you see their face?" Tom shook his head. "Too dark, sir, but they wore a long coat like Mr. Lionel's. Or maybe the professor's, I don't know." Grayson spoke, his voice calm. "Tom, you should have reported. This at once. Sir Reginald might still be alive." Tom flinched, his hands shaking. "I was scared, Mr. Grayson. I didn't know he'd be dead." Poirot watched Grayson closely, noting the butler's steady gaze. "Mercy, Tom," he said. "You have helped now. Rest. Say nothing more." As they left the kitchen, Japp muttered, "Sounds like Lionel or Marlowe, but digging. For what?" "For this," Poirot said, patting his coat where the box lay hidden. "The killer seeks the same fortune we do. But they are not as clever as Hercule Poirot." Back in the drawing room, the household gathered, their faces tense. Clara sat by the fire, her eyes red from crying. Lionel paced, his hands in his pockets. Marlowe stood by a window, his book tucked under his arm. Grayson served tea, his movements silent but precise. "Mr. Poirot," Lionel snapped, "any progress? Or are we just prisoners in our own home?" Poirot smiled, his voice calm. "Patience, monsieur. The truth is like a rose, it blooms slowly. But I have found a clue, and the killer knows it. Clara gasped, her cup rattling. A clue? What kind? Poirot held up the locket, letting it catch the light. This leads us to the fortune, and the fortune leads us to the murderer. Be careful, all of you. The one who killed Sir Reginald is among us. Marlowe adjusted his glasses, his voice nervous. You're sure it's one of us? Couldn't it be an outsider? Nan, Poirot said firmly. The poison was in the water, given last night. Only someone in this house could have done it. Lionel cursed, storming to the door. I'm not staying for this nonsense. I'm no killer. Japp blocked him. No one leaves, Mr. Hawthorne. Orders. Lionel glared but sat, his face dark. Clara whispered, Please, Mr. Poirot, find who did this. Uncle didn't deserve to die. Poirot nodded, his eyes kind but sharp. I will, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot always finds the truth. As night fell, the manor grew darker, its halls filled with creaks and shadows. Poirot sat in his room, the locket and box before him. He opened Sir Reginald's notebook, finding more sketches of roses and numbers. The Latin phrase echoed in his mind. The rose in stone hides the truth. The key, small and brass, gleamed in the candlelight. Where did it fit? A door, a chest, another puzzle. Hastings burst in, his face excited. Poirot, I heard something again. Footsteps, outside my window. Someone's sneaking around. Poirot stood, his coat already on. Then we follow, Hastings. The killer moves, and so do we. Bring your courage, mon ami. The night holds secrets. They slipped into the hall, the manor silent, but alive with danger. Poirot's mind burned, with questions. Who was the shadow in the garden? Why did Grayson watch Tom so closely? Was Clara's fear real, or a mask? And Marlowe's books, were they a scholar's passion or a criminal's cover? The rose of stone held the next clue. But the killer was one step ahead. Poirot smiled into the dark. Let them try. Hercule Poirot would not be outwitted. Chapter 4. A Hidden Message. The night wrapped Hawthorne Manor in a shroud of darkness. Its stone walls, looming like silent giants under a moonless sky. Hercule Poirot stood by his bedroom window, the golden locket in his hand, its cryptic symbols glinting faintly in the candlelight. The small brass key and the Latin note from the metal box found beneath the rose statue lay on his desk, their secrets teasing his little grey cells. Sir Reginald's murder by cyanide was a bold strike, and the killer was still in the house, watching, waiting. Poirot's sharp green eyes narrowed as he heard a faint creak in the hall, a sound that did not belong to the manor's usual groans. Someone was moving, and Poirot was ready. Monsieur Hastings, he whispered, his voice low but urgent. Quickly, we have a visitor in the night. Captain Hastings, half asleep in a chair by the fire, jolted upright, his brown hair sticking out like a hedgehog's spines. His tweed jacket hung loosely, unbuttoned from his restless nap. Poirot, what's that? He mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Footsteps again. Oui, Poirot said, slipping the locket, key, and note into his pocket. The killer does not sleep, and neither must we. Come, silently. Hastings grabbed his coat, his boots scuffing softly as he followed Poirot to the door. The hall was dark, lit only by a single candle flickering on a table. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting the portraits of Hawthorne ancestors into grim watchers. Poirot held up a hand, listening. Another creak, soft but deliberate, came from the staircase. leading to the ground floor. He motioned for Hastings to stay close, his small frame moving with the grace of a cat. They crept down the stairs, the air cold and heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked steadily, its pendulum a heartbeat. In the silence, Poirot paused at the bottom, his eyes scanning the darkness. A faint light glowed from the library door, left slightly ajar. Someone was inside. "Careful, Hastings," Poirot whispered, his voice barely audible. "We surprise them, but we do not alarm them." Hastings nodded, his hand tightening on his coat pocket, where he kept a small flashlight. They slipped. The library, the door creaking as Poirot pushed it open. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp on the table, casting long shadows across the shelves. Books lay scattered, some open, their pages fluttering as if touched by a ghost. At the far end, near the window overlooking the rose garden, a figure stood, there, back to the door. They were tall, wearing a long coat, and their hands moved quickly. Rifling through a stack of papers, Poirot cleared his throat, his voice sharp. "Bonsoir, monsieur, or perhaps mademoiselle. It is late for reading, Nan." The figure spun, dropping a book with a thud. It was Professor Marlowe, his grey hair wild, his glasses slipping down his nose. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he clutched a notebook, sir. Reginald's notebook, the one Poirot had found under the pillow. "Mr. Poirot," Marlowe stammered, stepping back. I was just researching. The code, you see, I thought I could help." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his smile polite but cold. "Help, monsieur, by sneaking in the night. That is not the way of a scholar. What is in that notebook?" Marlowe hesitated, his fingers tightening on the book. It's Sir Reginald's. I found it here, on the table. I thought it might hold clues." Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "You found it, you say? Curious, for I kept it safe in my room. Hand it over, if you please." Marlowe swallowed, passing the notebook to Poirot. Hastings moved to the table, his flashlight sweeping the room. "He's been busy, Poirot. Look at these books all about ciphers and codes. He's obsessed." "Obsessed, perhaps," Poirot said, flipping through the notebook. Its pages were filled with numbers, sketches of roses, and more Latin phrases. One page caught his eye, a drawing of the rose statue with an arrow pointing to its base, labelled secundum gradum. Poirot translated silently. The second step. The box they'd found was the first clue. This was the next. Professor Poirot said, his eyes locking onto Marlowe's. "Why do you search in secret? Do you seek the fortune for yourself?" Marlowe's face reddened. "No, I'm a scholar, not a thief. Sir Reginald asked me to study the locket. I thought the notebook might help solve the code." Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. Story was thin, like a threadbare coat. Was he a scholar or a man hiding greed behind glasses? Poirot tucked the notebook into his pocket, beside the locket and key. "Very well, monsieur. But Hercule Poirot advises you to stay in your room. At night. The manor is not safe." Marlowe nodded, his hands shaking as he gathered his papers and left. Hastings watched him go, frowning. "He's lying, Poirot. I'd bet my hat on it." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his fingers tapping the notebook. "But lies are like shadows. They hide the truth, but point to it." We return to the garden at dawn. The rose statue has more to say. They went back to Poirot's room, the manor quiet but alive with secrets. Poirot sat by the fire, studying. The notebook. The Latin phrase, secundum gradum, suggested another clue at the statue's base. The key might unlock something there, or elsewhere in the manor. But the killer's boldness poisoning Sir Reginald, sneaking in the night meant time was short. Dawn broke, the sky a pale grey, the air sharp with mist. Poirot and Hastings dressed warmly and headed to the rose garden, the metal box and key in Poirot's pocket. The garden was silent, its roses drooping under dew. The stone statue stood like a sentinel, its carved petals chipped but proud. Poirot knelt, examining the base more closely. The ivy was disturbed, as if someone else had been digging recently, perhaps the shadow Tom had seen. Hastings, Poirot said, pointing to a small crack in the stone. Look here, a hollow space, perhaps. Hastings used the trowel from the previous day, prying at the crack. The stone shifted, revealing a hidden compartment, small but deep. Inside was another metal box, this one smaller, its surface etched with the same symbols as the locket. Poirot tried the brass key from the first box. It fit perfectly. He turned it, the lock clicking open with a satisfying snap. Mon ami, Poirot said, his eyes bright. The second clue. Inside the box was a folded parchment, its edges brittle, and a tiny silver rose, no bigger than a coin. The parchment was written in Latin, like the first in Umbre's Rosa Floret. Poirot translated softly, in the shadows, the rose blooms. He turned the silver rose, noticing a tiny engraving on its Barker number 8, matching one of the locket's numbers. Hastings grinned, holding the rose to the light. Another piece of the puzzle, Poirot. This is getting exciting. Poirot nodded, but his face was grave. Exciting, yes, but dangerous. The killer seeks these clues, too. We must be careful. As they stood, a shout came from the manor. Inspector. Japp ran toward them, his face red from the cold. Poirot, trouble. Lionel's causing a scene, says he's leaving, orders or not. And Clara's locked herself in her room, won't come out. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The net tightens. Inspector, let us see what Monsieur Lionel has to say. They returned. To the manor, the boxes and clues hidden in Poirot's coat. The drawing-room was chaos. Lionel stood by the fireplace, his face flushed, yelling at a constable. I'm not a prisoner. I've done nothing wrong. Grayson stood nearby, his face calm but his eyes sharp. Clara was absent, her door upstairs locked, according to Japp. Marlowe sat in a corner, his book open, pretending to read but watching. Everyone, enough, Monsieur Lionel. Poirot's voice cut through the noise like a knife. You will not leave. A man is dead, and the killer is here. Running will not help you. Lionel spun, his hands clenched. You think I killed him? My own uncle. For what his gold? I don't need it. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Do you not? Your debts, they are known in the village. Gambling, I hear, is a cruel master. Lionel's face paled, but he said nothing. Japp stepped forward, his notebook out. Poirot's right. Stay put, Mr. Hawthorne. We're watching you. Grayson spoke, his voice smooth. Gentlemen, perhaps. Some tea to calm everyone. Poirot watched the butler closely. Mercy, Grayson, but no. We have work to do. Inspector, please check on Mademoiselle Clara. Her silence worries me. Japp nodded, heading upstairs. Poirot turned to Lionel, his voice soft but sharp. Monsieur, tell me, where were you last night, after dinner? Lionel crossed his arms. In my room, sulking. Ask anyone. And you, Professor? Poirot asked, turning to Marlowe. Marlowe adjusted his glasses, his voice nervous. In the library, as I said, until you found me. Poirot nodded, his mind turning. Lionel's anger, Marlowe's sneaking, Clara's fear, Grayson's. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but none fit perfectly yet. Japp returned, his face grim. Clara's fine, but shaken. Says she heard someone outside her window last night. Same time Tom saw that shadow in the garden. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A busy night, it seems. We must search the manor, Inspector. The killer leaves traces, and Hercule Poirot will find them. They spent the day investigating, Poirot leading the way. He examined Sir Reginald's room again, finding a faint smudge on the window grease, perhaps from a glove. In the library, he noticed a book out of place, its spine cracked as if opened repeatedly. It was a history of the Hawthorne family, with a chapter on the rose garden marked with a pencil note, "The heart lies below." Hastings, meanwhile, questioned the staff. The cook swore no cyanide was in the kitchen, but a bottle of cleaning fluid was missing from the pantry. The maid reported hearing whispers in the hall after midnight, near Grayson's quarters. Each clue was a thread, weaving a web. Poirot was determined to untangle as evening fell. Poirot gathered the household in the drawing-room. The fire crackled, but the air was thick with tension. He held up the silver rose, letting it catch the light. "This," he said, "is the second clue. The code moves forward, and so does the killer. I warn you, all Hercule Poirot is close. Hide your secrets." "Well, for I will find them." Clara shivered, Lionel glared, Marlowe fidgeted, and Grayson stood still, his face a mask. Japp posted extra constables, ensuring no one left. Poirot returned to his room, the locket, boxes, and rose on his desk. He opened the notebook again, sketching the clues, the rose statue, the Latin phrases, the numbers 17, 42, 8. The killer was bold, but Poirot was bolder. The shadows held the rose, and the rose held the truth. Chapter 5. The red herring. The fog clung to Hawthorne Manor like a ghostly veil, wrapping the old stone walls in a damp, grey haze. Hercule Poirot stood in the rose garden, the morning air sharp against his face, his black coat buttoned tightly against the chill. In his pocket, the golden locket, the brass key, the Latin note, and the tiny silver rose, nestled together, each a piece of the puzzle left by Sir Reginald's father. The second Latin clue, in umbris rosa floret, or in the shadows, the rose blooms echoed in his mind, teasing his little grey cells. Sir Reginald's murder by cyanide was a dark shadow over the manor, and the killer was close, their steps echoing in the night. Poirot's green eyes scanned the garden, lingering on the stone rose statue, its carved petals glistening with dew. The second clue had been found here, but the killer was hunting, too, and Poirot knew time was slipping away. "Monsieur Hastings," Poirot called, his voice cutting through the fog. "We must move quickly. The rose hides more secrets, but so does the manor and its people." Captain Hastings emerged from the manor's back door, his tweed jacket damp from the mist, his brown hair flattened by the wet air. He carried a steaming cup of tea, his face tired but eager. "Poirot, it's barely light out," he said, blowing on his tea. "Couldn't we wait for the sun to burn off this fog? I can hardly see the statue." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile on his lips. "Nan, mon ami, the fog is our friend today. It hides us from watching eyes. The killer is bold, but Hercule Poirot is bolder. Come, we examine the statue again." Hastings sighed, setting, His tea on a garden bench. Right, the statue. That Latin note in the shadows, the rose blooms. You think there's another clue hidden there? Perhaps, Poirot said, kneeling by the statue's base. His gloved hands brushed away. Wet ivy, revealing the stone's rough surface. The compartment they'd found yesterday was empty now, its secrets taken, but Poirot's eyes searched for more. Decode is a path, Hastings. Each clue leads to the next. The rose, the shadows, they point us forward. As they worked, the manor loomed behind them, its tall windows dark, like eyes watching through the fog. The air smelled of earth and roses, heavy with the promise of rain. Poirot's fingers traced the statue's base, finding a faint groove, barely visible. He pressed it, but nothing moved. Curious, he murmured, the statue guards its truth well. Before Hastings could respond, a shout broke the silence, sharp and panicked. It came from the edge of the garden, near the old stone wall. Poirot stood, his eyes narrowing. Quickly, Hastings. They ran toward the sound, their boots sinking into the damp grass. The fog parted, revealing Tom, the groundskeeper, standing by a shed, his face pale, his hands clutching a burlap sack. A constable stood beside him, his notebook out, his face grim. Inspector Japp was hurrying from the manor, his coat flapping. Poirot, Japp called, his voice rough. We've got trouble. Tom's found something, and it's not good. Tom's hands shook as he held up the sack. I was clearing weeds, sir, near the wall. Found this buried under a bush. It's coins. Gold ones. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he took the sack, opening it carefully. Inside were a dozen gold coins, heavy and old, their edges worn but shining. Each bore a rose emblem, matching the locket's design. Mon Dieu, Poirot said softly. The fortune, or part of it. Japp frowned, scratching his moustache. Looks like the treasure Sir Reginald was on about. But why's it here, and why now? Tom shifted, his eyes darting. I swear, sir, I just found it. I wasn't stealing. I was going to tell Mr. Grayson, but then the constable saw me. Poirot watched Tom closely, noting his nervous hands, his quick glances toward the manor. You did well to show us, Tom, but tell me, when did you find this? This morning, sir, Tom said, his voice trembling, just before dawn. I saw the ground was loose, like someone dug it up recently. Hastings leaned in, whispering, Poirot, you think this is it? The fortune, Poirot shook his head slightly. Nan, Hastings, this is too easy. A fortune hidden for years does not appear in a sack under a bush. This is a trick, a red herring, meant to mislead. Japp raised an eyebrow. You saying someone planted it? We, Poirot said, his voice firm. The killer wishes us to think the treasure is found, to stop our search. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily fooled. He handed the sack to Japp, who ordered the constable to guard it. Tom, you're coming with us, Japp said. We need to talk. They returned to the manor, the fog thickening as they entered. The grand hall. The air inside was cold, the paintings of Hawthorne ancestors glaring down. Grayson stood by the staircase, his black suit immaculate, his face a mask of calm. Clara Hawthorne sat in the drawing room, her hands twisting a handkerchief, her face pale. Lionel Hawthorne paced near the fireplace, his dark eyes flashing with anger. Professor Marlowe was in the library, his nose buried in a book. But Poirot noticed his hands shook as he turned the pages. Japp, gathered everyone in the drawing room, the sack of coins on the table. "Right," he said, his voice gruff. "Tom, found these in the garden. Anyone know anything about them?" Lionel snorted, crossing his arms. "Gold coins, that's Uncle's treasure, isn't it? And now the groundskeeper's got it. He's your killer, Inspector." Tom's face reddened. "I ain't no killer. I found them, that's all." Clara spoke, her voice soft but sharp. "Lionel, stop it. Tom's worked here for years. He wouldn't hurt Uncle." Marlowe adjusted his glasses, his voice nervous. "Perhaps the coins are a decoy, as Mr. Poirot suggests. Sir Reginald's father was clever. The real fortune might still be hidden." Poirot nodded, his eyes moving from face to face. "Precisely, Professor. These coins are a distraction. The true fortune is tied to the locket and the clues we have found: the rose, the shadows, the Latin. But the killer knows this and plays a game with us." Japp frowned, rubbing his temple. "So, _Forest, we're back to square one. Who's the killer, then?" "Not Tom," Poirot said firmly. "He is no mastermind. The poisoner of Sir Reginald planned carefully. Cyanide is not a gardener's tool." Tom nodded, his shoulders sagging. "I didn't do it, sir, I swear." Grayson spoke, his voice smooth. "Tom is loyal, Mr. Poirot. He would not harm Sir Reginald." Poirot's eyes narrowed at Grayson. "Loyalty is a mask, monsieur. It hides many things. Tell me, where were you when Sir Reginald was poisoned?" Grayson's face remained calm. "In my quarters, sir, preparing for the morning." Poirot nodded, filing the answer away. He turned to Tom. "These coins," Tom described the spot where "You found them?" Tom swallowed. "Near the wall, sir, under a big rose bush. The dirt was loose, like someone dug it up and covered it quick." Poirot's mind raced. The loose dirt matched Tom's story of the shadow digging in the garden. But why leave coins behind? A mistake, or a deliberate trap? Inspector Poirot said, "Search the garden again. The killer may have left more traces." Japp nodded, sending his men out. Poirot turned to the group, holding up the silver rose from the second box. "This is the true path to the fortune. The coins are a lie, but lies reveal truth. Nan, someone wishes to stop Hercule Poirot." Lionel laughed bitterly. "You're obsessed with that locket, Poirot. Maybe you're the one playing games." Clara gasped. "Lionel, how dare you?" Poirot smiled, unruffled. "Monsieur Lionel, your anger is loud, but your secrets are louder. Hercule Poirot hears them." Lionel's face reddened, but he said nothing. Marlowe spoke, his voice shaky. "The code is complex, Mr. Poirot. Perhaps the coins were a test, like the locket." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A test, perhaps. But for whom? The killer tests us all." The day passed in a blur of questions and searches. Poirot and Hastings returned to the library, studying the Latin note and the silver rose. The number 8 on the rose matched the locket's code, but its meaning was unclear. Poirot opened Sir Reginald's notebook, finding a sketch of a stained glass window in the Manor's chapel, a rose at its center. "The shadows," he murmured. "The window casts a shadow. Perhaps it points to the next clue." Hastings grinned. "To the chapel, then?" "We," Poirot said, standing. "But first, we speak to Clara. Her fear hides something." They found Clara in her room, sitting by a window, her face pale. She stood as they entered, her hands trembling. "Mr. Poirot, have you found the killer?" "Not yet, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. but I need your truth. You saw a shadow in Sir Reginald's room. What else do you know? Clara's eyes filled with tears. I heard Uncle talking to someone days before he died. They were arguing about the locket. I couldn't hear who it was, but Uncle was angry, said they'd never get it. Poirot nodded, his mind turning. Mercy, Clara, your words are a light in the shadows. As they left, Hastings whispered, she's scared. Poirot thinks she's telling the truth. Part of it, Poirot said, but fear hides more than lies. To the chapel, now. The chapel was a small stone building behind the manor, its stained glass window glowing faintly in the fog. The rose at its centre shone red and gold, casting a faint shadow on the floor. Poirot stood where the shadow fell, his eyes scanning the stones. Hastings looked for a loose stone. They searched, finding a slab that shifted under pressure. Beneath it was a hollow space, empty but marked with scratches, as if something had been removed. Poirot's face darkened. The killer was here first. They seek the next clue. Hastings cursed. We're one step behind, Poirot. Nan, Poirot said, his eyes bright. We are close. The killer is desperate. Tomorrow we find the truth. As night fell, the manor grew darker, its halls filled with whispers. Poirot sat in his room, the locket key rose, a note before him. The killer was clever, but Hercule Poirot was cleverer. The rose's shadow would lead him to the truth, and the murderer would fall. Chapter 6. The Professor's secret. The fog over Hawthorne Manor had lifted by mid-morning, leaving a damp chill that seeped into the bones of the old stone house. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his black coat buttoned tightly, his sharp green eyes scanning the marble floor and the stern portraits on the walls. The golden locket, brass key, silver rose, and Latin notes rested safely in his pocket, each a piece of the puzzle left by Sir Reginald's father. The words in Umbris rose a floret in the shadows. The rose blooms echoed in his mind, a clue pointing to the manor's chapel, where an empty compartment had been found beneath a stained glass window. Sir Reginald's murder by cyanide was a dark thread in this web, and the killer was close, their moves growing bolder. Poirot's moustache twitched as he heard a faint clatter from the library, a sound too deliberate for the manor's usual creaks. Monsieur Hastings, Poirot called, his voice crisp but low. We must be swift. The killer does not rest, and neither does Hercule Poirot. Captain Hastings appeared from the dining room, his tweed jacket slightly rumpled, a half-eaten scone in his hand. His brown hair was messy, but his eyes sparkled with the thrill of the chase. Poirot, what's the plan? He asked, brushing crumbs from his chin. That empty spot in the chapel's got me stumped. Are we back to the locket? Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the pocket where the clues lay. The locket is the heart, Hastings, but the chapel was a step. The killer took something from that compartment, but they cannot hide from Poirot's little grey cells. We go to the library now. The books speak if we listen. Hastings grinned, tossing the scone onto a table. Right, more books. Let's hope they're less dusty this time. They crossed the hall, the air heavy with the scent of wax and old wood. The library's oak doors loomed, their carvings of roses a quiet nod to the mystery. Inside, the room was a maze of shelves, books, stacked high, their spines faded by time. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden patches on the floor, but the air felt cold, as if the manor held its breath. A table held scattered papers and Professor Marlowe's book on ciphers, its pages marked with hasty notes. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he spotted a fresh scratch on the table's edge, as if something heavy had been dragged across it. "Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the scratch, "this is new. Someone was here, searching, perhaps after we left last night." Hastings knelt, his flashlight sweeping the floor. "You think it's Marlowe? He was sneaking around before, with that notebook." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice soft but sharp. "The professor claims to be a scholar, but his hands shake, and his eyes avoid mine. We shall see what he hides." They began searching the shelves, Poirot's gloved hands moving with care, pulling books marked with numbers or rows. Motifs. Hastings climbed a ladder, checking higher shelves, his boots creaking on the rungs. The library was quiet, save for the rustle of pages and the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Poirot opened Sir Reginald's notebook, found in Chapter 4, and studied the sketch of the chapel's stained-glass window. The note beside it read, "Secundum gradum, the second step." The empty compartment was proof the killer was ahead, but Poirot sensed they'd missed something. They worked. The library door opened, and Clara Hawthorne stepped inside, her face pale, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She clutched a shawl, her eyes darting nervously. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I need to speak with you. It's about Professor Marlowe." Poirot turned, his eyes kind but piercing. "Speak, mademoiselle." Hercule Poirot listens to all truths. Clara glanced at Hastings, then back to Poirot. "I saw him last night, after you caught him in here. He was in the hall near Uncle's room, whispering to someone. I couldn't see who, but he sounded scared. He mentioned the locket and something about debts." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Debts, you say? Most interesting. And this other person any clue to their identity?" Clara shook her head, her hands twisting the shawl. It was too dark, but their voice was low, like a man's. "I'm frightened, Mr. Poirot. What if they know I heard?" Poirot placed a hand on her arm, his voice gentle. "Fear not, Clara. You have done well to tell me. Stay in your room today and speak of this." "To no one." Clara nodded, her eyes brimming with tears, and left. Hastings frowned, climbing down the ladder. "Debts sounds like Marlowe's in trouble. Think he's the killer?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A killer, perhaps not, but a man with secrets. We must find him." They left the library, heading to the drawing room, where Inspector Japp was questioning the household. Lionel Hawthorne paced by the fireplace, his face flushed with anger. Grayson, the butler, stood by the sideboard, pouring tea with his usual calm. Marlowe was absent, and Poirot's suspicion grew. Japp looked up as they entered, his moustache twitching. "Poirot, any luck?" "Lionel's been kicking up a fuss, and Clara's locked herself away again." "Where is Professor Marlowe?" Poirot asked, his voice sharp. Japp shrugged, said he was going to the village for a walk. Needed air, he claimed. Eyes narrowed. A walk in this fog. None, Inspector. He runs from questions. We must find him. Japp sent a constable to check the village, but Poirot had another idea. "Hastings, come. We search Marlowe's room. A man who whispers of debts hides more than books." They climbed the stairs, the manor's halls dark despite the morning light. Marlowe's room was small but cluttered, with books and papers scattered on a desk. A suitcase lay open, half-packed, as if he planned to leave. Poirot's fingers moved quickly, searching drawers and pockets. In a coat, he found a crumpled letter, its ink smudged but readable. It was from a man named Victor, demanding payment for services rendered and threatening to expose Marlowe if he didn't pay by week's end. Hastings, Poirot said, holding up the letter, this Victor is a shadow in our puzzle. Marlowe is no scholar. He is a man in debt, perhaps desperate enough to steal. Hastings whistled. You think he killed Sir Reginald for the gold? Poirot shook his head. Not yet, mon ami. Murder is bold. Marlowe is nervous. But he knows more than he says. We confront him. They returned to the drawing room, where Japp was arguing with Lionel. You can't keep me here forever, Lionel shouted, his hands clenched. I'm no criminal. Calm yourself, Monsieur Lionel, Poirot said, his voice cutting through the noise. Your anger does not help your case. Tell me, have you spoken to Professor Marlowe about his financial troubles? Lionel's face paled. What, Marlowe? He's just a bookworm. What's he got to do with this? Poirot smiled, his eyes sharp. Perhaps nothing, perhaps everything. We shall see. The constable returned, breathless. Sir Marlowe's not in the village, but Tom saw him heading to the old clock tower, near the manor's edge. Poirot's eyes lit up. The clock tower. Mercy, Constable. Hastings. Japp, we go now. They hurried through the garden, the fog thinning but still cloaking the grounds. The clock tower was a crumbling stone structure, its clock face cracked, its hands frozen at midnight. Ivy clung to its walls, and the air smelled of moss and rust. Poirot pushed open the heavy door, its hinges groaning. Inside, the air was damp, the floor littered with leaves. A spiral staircase led upward, and faint footsteps echoed above. Marlowe, Poirot called, his voice echoing. Hercule Poirot wishes to speak. A scuffle came from above, then silence. Poirot climbed the stairs, Hastings and Japp behind him. At the top, Marlowe stood by the clock's gears, his face pale, a notebook clutched to his chest. Mr. Poirot, he stammered, I was just exploring. The tower's history enough, Poirot said, his voice sharp. You run, you hide, you whisper of debts. Tell me, who is Victor, and what do you know of the locket? Glasses slipped, his hands shaking. Victor's a creditor. I owe money, yes, but I didn't kill Sir Reginald. He hired me to study the locket, to break the code. I thought the tower might hold clues, sir. Reginald mentioned it once. Pure stepped closer, his eyes like daggers. And this notebook, another of Sir Reginald's, stolen by you. Marlowe hesitated, then handed it over. I found it here, in a box under the gears. I swear I was going to give it to you. Poirot opened the notebook, its pages filled with more sketches of roses and numbers, but one page stood out, a map of the manor, with a rose marked in the chapel. A Latin phrase was scrawled beside it, Tertium gradum, the third step. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. The code moves forward. But you, Marlowe, you play a dangerous game. Japp grabbed Marlowe's arm. You're not going anywhere, Professor. You've got some explaining to do. Marlowe sagged, his face defeated. I'm no killer. I just needed money. Lionel paid me to help with the code, but I didn't know he'd do anything. Poirot's eyes widened. Lionel paid you. For what? Marlowe swallowed. To find the gold. He said he'd split it with me if I cracked the code first. Hastings gasped. Lionel. I knew he was trouble. Poirot held up a hand. Calm, Hastings. Marlowe, you will tell Inspector Japp everything. But first, this map it leads us back to the chapel. The third step awaits. They escorted Marlowe back to the manor, Japp keeping a firm grip on him. In the drawing room, Lionel was pacing, Clara was by the fire, and Grayson stood silently, his eyes watching everything. Poirot held up the new notebook, his voice calm but firm. The code progresses, mise, Amos. But so does the danger. Someone in this room knows more than they say. Lionel stopped, his face red. What's that supposed to mean? You accusing me now? Clara whispered, Please, Mr. Poirot, just find the truth. Grayson offered tea, but Poirot waved him away. No time, monsieur, the chapel calls. Inspector, keep Marlowe here. Hastings. Come. They returned to the chapel, its stained glass rose glowing in the dim light. Poirot studied the map, the rose marking a spot near the altar. He knelt, his fingers searching the stone floor. A slab shifted, revealing a small hollow, but it was empty. Another clue taken. Poirot's face darkened. The killer is fast, but not fast enough. As night fell, the manor grew colder, its shadows deeper. Poirot sat in his room, the locket, key, rose, and notebooks before him. The Latin clues and rose motifs were a path, but the killer was steps ahead. Confession pointed to Lionel, but was it too easy? The little grey cells worked, weaving the threads of truth. Chapter 7. Midnight in the Tower. The night lay heavy over Hawthorne Manor, its stone walls cloaked in shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. Hercule Poirot sat in his room, the golden locket, brass key, silver rose, and 2 Latin notes on his desk, their cryptic messages glowing faintly in the candlelight. The phrases Rosa in lapide silet, verum eniem bris cosa, floret, translated to, the rose in stone hides the truth, and in the shadows the rose blooms. The newest clue, tertium gradum, or the third step, found in the clock tower, pointed back to the chapel, where an empty compartment had mocked their efforts. Sir Reginald's murder by cyanide was a dark thread weaving through this puzzle, and the killer was bold, stealing clues before Poirot could reach them. His sharp green eyes gleamed as he heard a faint creak outside his door. Someone was moving in the night, and Poirot was ready to act. Monsieur Hastings, Poirot whispered, his voice low but urgent, rising from his chair. Awake, mon ami. The manor stirs, and we must follow. Captain Hastings, dozing in an armchair by the fire, jolted upright, his tweed jacket crumpled, his brown hair a mess. He rubbed his eyes, blinking in the dim light. Poirot, it's past midnight, he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. What's going on? More footsteps. Oui, Poirot said, slipping the locket and clues into his pocket. His black coat was already buttoned, his movements quick and precise. The killer does not sleep, and neither will Hercule Poirot. I heard a sound soft but deliberate. It comes from the hall. We go to the clock tower. Hastings grabbed his coat, his boots scuffing the floor as he followed. The tower again, after Marlowe's stunt. You think he's back? Moustache twitched, a faint smile on his lips. Perhaps Marlowe, perhaps another. The tower holds secrets. Hastings, the map we found there points to more than the chapel. We must see who hunts in the dark. They crept into the hall, the air cold and heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. The manor was silent, save for the steady tick of the grandfather clock downstairs. Moonlight filtered through a window, casting long shadows that twisted the portraits of hawthorn ancestors into grim watchers. Poirot's eyes darted to a faint mark on the floor, a scuff of dirt, fresh and out of place in the polished hall. Someone had passed recently, heading toward the back of the manor. They moved quietly, their steps soft on the creaky stairs. The back door was ajar, a sliver of moonlight spilling through. Poirot pushed it open, the night air sharp with the smell of damp earth and roses. The clock tower loomed at the garden's edge, its cracked face glowing faintly, its hands still. Frozen at midnight. A light flickered inside, brief but unmistakable. "Hastings," Poirot whispered, his voice barely audible. "We approach with care. The killer may be armed." Hastings nodded, his hand on his flashlight, his face tense, but eager. They slipped through the garden, the fog thin but clinging to the roses like ghostly fingers. The tower's door was open, its hinges rusty and silent. Poirot peered inside, seeing a faint glow from the spiral staircase leading to the clocks. Gears. Voices low, urgent, drifted down, too muffled to make out words. Poirot motioned for Hastings to stay low, and they climbed the stairs, the stone steps cold under their feet. The air grew damp, smelling of moss and rust. At the top, the clock's gears loomed, their iron teeth glinting in the moonlight. Two figures stood in the shadows, Clara Hawthorne, her dark hair loose, her face pale, and Grayson, the butler, his black suit blending with the dark. They held a folded paper, its edges worn, and their voices were sharp with tension. "You promised it would be quick," Clara whispered, her hands trembling. "If they find out, they won't," Grayson said, his voice low but firm. "Keep your nerve, Clara. We're close." Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the dark like a blade. "Bonsoir, mademoiselle, monsieur." A strange place for a midnight meeting. "Nen," Clara gasped, dropping the paper. Grayson spun, his face calm but his eyes sharp. Before he could speak, a noisy heavy thud came from behind the gears. Clara screamed, and Grayson staggered, clutching his head as a shadow darted past, knocking him to the floor. The figure vanished down the stairs, their footsteps echoing. "Hastings," Poirot shouted, already moving. After them. Hastings ran, his flashlight beam bouncing down the stairs, but the shadow was gone, lost in the garden's fog. Poirot knelt by Grayson, who groaned, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Clara stood frozen, her hands over her mouth. "Help him, Mr. Poirot," she cried. "He's hurt." Poirot's eyes were sharp as he checked Grayson's pulse. "He lives, mademoiselle, but you will explain this meeting. What is this paper?" Clara hesitated, then picked up the paper, her hands shaking. "It's a map. I found it in Uncle's study. It shows the manor's passages, secret ones. Grayson was helping me look for the next clue." Poirot took the map, his fingers tracing its lines. It was crude, drawn in ink, with a rose marked in the library, chapel, and tower. A new mark pointed to a hidden door in the cellar. A Latin phrase was scrawled in the corner: "Per umbras adulutum," through the shadows to the light. "Mon," dear Poirot murmured, another step. But why meet here, in secret? Grayson sat up, wincing. "Clara asked for my help, sir. She scared thinks the killer's after her. We thought the tower was safe." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Safe, monsieur. Yet someone struck you. And this shadow they moved too quickly for Hercule Poirot's liking." Hastings returned, breathless. "Lost them, Poirot. They're fast, whoever they are." Poirot nodded. "Pocketing the map, we returned to the manor. Grayson, you will see the doctor. Clara, you will stay with Inspector Japp. This shadow grows bold, and Poirot will find them. They escorted Grayson and Clara back, the manor's halls dark and silent. Inspector Japp met them in the grand hall, his face grim. What's this? About a fight in the tower, he demanded, seeing Grayson's bloodied face. Poirot explained, showing Japp the map. A new clue, Inspector. The cellar holds the next step. But someone attacked Grayson, and Clara saw them. The killer is desperate. Japp ordered a constable to guard Clara and sent for the manor's doctor. Grayson sat in the drawing room, a cloth to his head, his face pale but calm. Lionel stormed in, his eyes blazing. What's going on? First coins, now fights. This place is a madhouse. Poirot turned, his voice sharp. Calm yourself, Monsieur Lionel. Your anger hides something. Where were you this night? Lionel crossed his arms. In my room, sleeping. Unlike some, I don't wander at midnight. Professor Marlowe entered, his glasses fogged from the cold. I heard shouting. Is everyone all right? Poirot's eyes locked onto him. You, monsieur, have a habit of appearing when trouble strikes. Tell me, did you visit the tower tonight? Marlowe paled, shaking his head. No, I was in my room, reading. I swear, Japp frowned. Everyone's got an alibi, Poirot, but someone's lying. We, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. And Hercule Poirot will find the lie. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings headed to the cellar, the map in hand. The air was damp, smelling of stone and mould. The cellar was a maze of crates and barrels, lit by a single lantern. Poirot followed the map's lines, finding a stone wall with a faint rose carved into it. He pressed it, and a low rumble echoed as a hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow passage. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low, we tread carefully. The killer knows these paths. They entered, the passage dark and tight, its walls cold to the touch. At its end was a small chamber, its floor stone, its walls bare except for a single iron gear embedded in the wall, etched with numbers matching. The locket, 1742-8. Poirot turned the gear, and a click echoed. But nothing opened. The third step, Poirot murmured, but incomplete. The killer took the next piece. Hastings cursed. They're always ahead, Poirot. How Poirot's eyes gleamed. They know the manor's secrets, Hastings, but so will we. They returned to the drawing room, where Japp was questioning Grayson. The butler claimed no memory of the attack, his face still pale. Clara sat nearby, her eyes red from crying. Lionel paced, muttering about being trapped. Marlowe read, his hands steady now, too steady. Poirot held up the map, his voice calm but firm. The cellar has spoken, mise amiss. The code moves forward, and the killer grows nervous. They strike in the dark, but Hercule Poirot sees through shadows. Clara shivered. Please, Mr. Poirot, stop them. Lionel snorted. Stop chasing. Ghosts, Poirot. You're wasting time. Marlowe spoke, his voice soft. The gear, did it have symbols? It might be a cipher wheel. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You know much, monsieur. Too much, perhaps. As night fell, the manor grew colder, its halls filled with whispers. Poirot sat in his room, the locket, key, rose, notes, and map before him. The gear's numbers were a clue, but the killer's attack on Grayson was a warning. The shadows hid the rose, but Poirot would find the light. Chapter 8. The Family Secrets. The morning light struggled through the heavy clouds over Hawthorne Manor, casting a pale glow on its stone walls, which seemed to hold centuries of secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his black coat buttoned neatly, his sharp green eyes scanning the marble floor and the stern portraits of Hawthorne ancestors. In his pocket rested the golden locket, brass key, silver rose, Latin notes, and the map from the clock tower, each a piece of the puzzle left by Sir Reginald's father. The Latin clues: Rosa in lapide salat verum, in umbris, and per umbras ad lucium, translated to the rose in stone hides the truth. In the shadows the rose blooms, and through the shadows to the light. The iron gear in the cellar, etched with the locket's numbers, 1742, 8, was a step forward. But the killer had stolen the next clue, staying one move ahead. Sir Reginald's murder by cyanide hung over the manor like a dark cloud, and the midnight attack on Grayson in the clock tower proved the killer was desperate. Poirot's moustache twitched as he heard a faint rustle from the drawing room, was awake, and his little grey cells were ready to unravel more truths. Monsieur Hastings, Poirot called, his voice crisp but low, echoing in the quiet hall. We have no time to waste. The manor hides secrets, and we must find them before the killer strikes again. Captain Hastings appeared from the staircase, his tweed jacket slightly wrinkled, his brown hair messy from a restless night. He carried a cup of tea, his eyes bright despite the early hour. Poirot, you're up before the roosters, he said, sipping his tea. What's next? That gear in the cellar didn't give us much, and Clara's story about the clock tower sounds fishy. Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the pocket where the clues lay. Clara hides something, Hastings, but so do they all. The map points to the cellar, but the manor's secrets are not only in stone. We search Sir Reginald's study today. A man like him keeps records papers, diaries, truths. Hastings grinned, setting his cup down. A diary, now that's more like it. Let's dig into the old man's thoughts. They crossed the hall, the air cold and heavy with the scent of wax and old wood. The portraits watched, their painted eyes seeming to follow every step. Sir Reginald's study was a small room off the library, its door locked since his death. Inspector Japp had given Poirot the key, trusting his skill to find what the police had missed. Poirot turned the key, the lock clicking softly, and pushed. The door open. The study was dim, its curtains drawn, smelling of leather and ink. A heavy oak desk sat in the center, piled with papers, a quill pen, and an inkpot. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a single rose carved into the desk's edge caught Poirot's eye. Sign this room was part of the puzzle. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low, search the desk. Look for anything hidden drawers, false. Bottoms, notes. Hastings nodded, rolling up his sleeves. Right, let's see what Sir Reginald was hiding. They worked quietly, Poirot's gloved hands moving with care, lifting papers and books. The desk held bills, letters, and a ledger. Of the manor's expenses, but nothing tied to the code. Hastings tugged at a drawer, finding it stuck. Poirot, this one's tight. Might be something inside. Poirot joined him, his fingers probing the drawer's edges. A faint click sounded, and a hidden panel sprang open, revealing a small leather-bound diary, its cover worn but intact. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he opened it, the pages filled with Sir Reginald's neat handwriting. Mon Dieu, Hastings, he murmured. The heart of a man lies in his words. The diary was a treasure of secrets, its entries spanning years. Sir Reginald wrote of his father's obsession with codes, his love for the rose garden, and his distrust of his family. One entry, dated a month ago, caught Poirot's attention. Lionel asks for money again, his debts a noose around his neck. I fear he sees only gold, not family. Clara hides her pain, but I know her husband, Victor, is a shadow on her heart. I must protect the fortune, for it is not mine to give, Victor, Hastings said, leaning over Poirot's shoulder. Clara's husband, she never mentioned him. Poirot's mustache twitched. Indeed, mon ami, Clara's secrets grow deeper. This Victor, he is a name we heard before in Marlowe's letter. A creditor, perhaps, or something more. They read on, finding another entry. Grayson is loyal, but his eyes are too sharp. Does he serve me or another? The locket is my only hope, but I fear it draws danger. The rose will guard the truth, as father promised. Poirot closed the diary, his mind racing. Sir Reginald knew he was in danger. Hastings, his family, his butler, his guest all suspect. We must speak to Clara about this, Victor. They left the study, locking the door behind them. The manor was stirring, its halls filled with a soft clatter of breakfast being prepared. In the drawing room, Clara sat by the fire, her face pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Lionel paced near a window, his dark eyes flashing with frustration. Professor Marlowe was absent, likely in the library, and Grayson moved silently. Serving tea with his usual calm, Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook open, his face grim. Poirot, Japp said, spotting them. Any luck? Lionel's been at it again, demanding to leave. Says he's got business in London. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Business, Monsieur Lionel, or debts that call you? Lionel spun, his face red. What's that supposed to mean? You've got no proof I did anything. Clara looked up, her voice soft. Please, Lionel, stop shouting. It doesn't help. Poirot turned to her, his voice gentle but firm. Mademoiselle Clara, a word, if you please, in private. Clara hesitated, then nodded, following Poirot and Hastings to the library. The room was quiet, its shelves looming like silent judges. Poirot closed the door, his eyes kind but piercing. Clara, you have not told us all. Who is Victor? Clara's face paled, her hands trembling. Victor, he's my husband, but we're not together. He's not a good man. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft. And yet he is tied to this house, Nan. Sir Reginald wrote of him, of your pain. Tell me, is Victor here, in the shadows? Clara's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. He left months ago, but he writes, demanding money. He knows about the fortune. I told him years ago, before we married. I'm scared, Mr. Poirot. What if he's back? Hastings frowned. Back beheld Poirot. You think he's the shadow from the clock tower? Poirot's eyes gleamed. A possibility, Hastings. Clara, did Victor know of the locket? Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, Uncle showed it to him once, before we fought. He was fascinated by it, kept asking about the code. Poirot's mustache twitched. Mercy, Clara, you have been brave. Say nothing of this to anyone. Hercule Poirot will protect you. Clara left, her steps shaky. Hastings whispered, Victor sounds like trouble, Poirot. Could he be the killer? Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes sharp. But Sir Reginald's diary speaks of many secrets. We must find Victor. They returned to the drawing room. where Japp was questioning Grayson. The butler stood tall, his face calm despite the bandage on his forehead from the tower attack. "I served Sir Reginald faithfully," Grayson said, his voice steady. "I would never harm him." Poirot watched him closely. "Loyalty is a word, monsieur. Actions speak. Louder, where were you when the shadow struck you?" Grayson's eyes flickered. "In the tower, as I said. Helping Clara, I saw nothing." Poirot nodded, filing the answer away. He turned to Japp. "Inspector, we must search for Victor. He may be near, hiding in the village or the grounds." Japp nodded, sending constables to check the village. And Hastings headed to the library, where Marlowe sat, his nose in a book. His glasses slipped, his hands steady now, but his eyes darted to Poirot. "Professor," Poirot said, his voice sharp, "you spoke of debts to Victor. Tell me more." Marlowe paled. "He's a man I owe money to, a gambler's debt. He threatened me, but I don't know where he is." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You know much, yet say little." "Be careful, monsieur. Lies are dangerous." The day passed in a blur of questions and searches. Poirot and Hastings returned to the study, combing through the diary for more clues. An entry mentioned a hidden panel in the chapel, tied to the rose window. Poirot's eyes lit up. "The third step, Hastings. The chapel holds the next clue." They hurried to the chapel, the stained glass rose glowing in the dim light. Poirot searched the altar, finding a loose panel behind it. Inside was a small leather pouch, empty but marked with a rose emblem. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "The killer was here too." Hastings cursed. "They're always ahead, Poirot." "Nan," Poirot said, his eyes bright. "They are desperate. We are close." As night fell, the manor grew darker, its halls filled with shadows. Poirot sat in his room, the locket key, rose, notes, map, and diary before him. Victor's shadow loomed, but so did the secrets of Clara, Lionel, Grayson, and Marlowe. The chapel's empty pouch was a taunt, but Poirot's little grey cells were weaving the truth from the shadows. Chapter 9. The Latin cipher. The morning sun barely pierced the thick clouds over Hawthorne Manor, casting a dull light on its ancient stone walls, which seemed to guard secrets as old as the roses in its garden. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his black coat buttoned tightly, his sharp green eyes scanning the polished marble floor and the stern portraits of Hawthorne ancestors. In his pocket rested the golden locket, brass key, silver rose, Latin notes, the clock tower map, and Sir Reginald's diary, each a piece of the intricate puzzle left by his father. The Latin clues: Rosa in lapide, celet, verum, inumbris, hosa floret, and per umbros ad lucium, translated to the rose in stone hides the truth. In the shadows, the rose blooms, and through the shadows to the light. The iron gear in the cellar and the empty pouch in the chapel's altar proved the killer was stealing clues, staying one step ahead. Sir Reginald's murder by cyanide was a dark thread weaving through this mystery, and the midnight attack on Grayson in the clock tower, coupled with Clara's revelation about her husband, Victor, showed the danger was growing. Poirot's moustache twitched as he heard a faint clatter from the drawing room. Someone was arguing, and his little grey cells were ready to unravel more truths. "Monsieur Hastings," Poirot called, his voice crisp but low, echoing in the quiet hall. "We have no time for idleness. The killer moves, and Hercule Poirot must move faster." Captain Hastings appeared from the staircase, his tweed jacket slightly askew, his brown hair messy from a hurried morning. He carried a half-eaten piece of toast, his eyes bright with the thrill of the chase, despite the early hour. "Poirot, you're up before the birds," he said, brushing crumbs from his chin. "What's the plan?" "That empty pouch in the chapels. Got me stumped, and Clara's story about Victor sounds like trouble." Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the pocket where the clues lay. "Trouble, oui, Hastings. Victor is a shadow in our puzzle, but so are Clara's fears, Lionel's debts, Grayson's calm, and Marlowe's secrets. The Latin clues point us forward, but we need help to translate the newest per umbras, ad Lucium. We go to the village, to the vicar. A man of the church knows Latin." Hastings grinned, tossing his toast onto a side table. "To the village. Then a vicar's bound to have some answers." They left the manor, the air sharp with the scent of damp grass and roses. The fog had lifted, but a chill hung over the grounds, the rose gardens silent under the grey sky. The village was a short walk down a winding path, its cottages huddled around a small church with a steeple that pierced the clouds. The vicar, Mr. Ellis, was a kindly old man with white hair and a gentle smile, found tending the church's flower beds. His eyes lit up when Poirot introduced himself. "Mr. Poirot," Mr. Ellis said, wiping dirt from his hands. "I've heard of your skill. How can a humble vicar help?" Poirot produced the Latin note, its ink faded but clear. "This phrase, Monsieur per umbras, ad Lucium. What does it mean, and does it hold meaning for the Hawthorne family?" Mr. Ellis adjusted his glasses, studying the note. "Through the shadows to the light," he said softly. "It's a phrase of hope, often used in religious texts. But for the Hawthornes, let me think." He paused, his brow furrowing. "Old Henry Hawthorne, Sir Reginald's father, was a friend of the church. He donated that stained glass rose window in our chapel. He once said it was his light through the shadows. Perhaps it's tied to that." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The chapel again, monsieur. Most interesting. And this number 8, does it mean anything here?" Mr. Ellis nodded. "The chapel has 8 pews. Henry was particular about that number, said it was his lucky one." "Mercy, Mr. Ellis," Poirot said, his voice warm but urgent. "You have lit a candle in the dark. We must return to the manor." They hurried back, the manor looming like a stone giant. The chapel's rose window glowed faintly, its red and gold petals casting a soft shadow on the stone floor. Poirot counted the pews exactly 8. He knelt by the 8th pew, his gloved hands searching for a hidden catch. A faint click sounded, and a small panel slid open, revealing a folded letter and a tiny brass disc, etched with a rose and the number 42. Monsieur Poirot murmured, unfolding the letter. It was written in Latin, its words neat, subaltern. "Veritas," he translated softly, beneath the altar, "the truth." Hastings grinned, holding the disc to the light. "Another clue, Poirot. We're catching up." Poirot's face was grave. "Oui, but the killer is close. This diskette matches the locket's numbers. The altar holds the next step." They moved to the altar, its stone surface worn but solid. Poirot's fingers traced its edges, finding a faint groove. He pressed, but nothing moved. "We need the disc," he said, inserting it into a small slot. A low rumble echoed, and a hidden panel opened, revealing a third Latin note and a letter from Henry Hawthorne. The note read, "Ultimum gradum, the final step." The letter was brief. "My son, beware betrayal from within. The rose guards the fortune, but only the true heart finds it. Hastings whistled. Betrayal from within. Sounds like... Sir Reginald suspected someone. Poirot nodded, pocketing the note and letter. His family, his butler, his guest all are suspects. But this Victor, Clara's husband, he is a shadow we must find. They returned to the manor, the air heavy with tension. In the drawing room, Lionel was shouting at Inspector Japp, his face red. "You can't keep me here like a prisoner. I've got rights." Clara sat by the fire, her face pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Grayson stood by the sideboard, his black suit immaculate, his eyes sharp despite his bandaged forehead. Professor Marlowe was in the library, his nose in a book, but Poirot sensed his nervousness. Japp spotted Poirot, his moustache twitching. "Poirot, what's this about the chapel? Found something?" Poirot held up the brass disc, letting it catch the light. "A clue, Inspector. Decode moves forward, to the altar, but the killer knows we are close. They strike in the dark, as they did with Grayson." Lionel spun, his eyes blazing. "Another clue. You're wasting time, Poirot. Clara's the one. You should watch, she's been sneaking around, whispering with Grayson." Clara gasped, standing. "That's a lie, Lionel. I'm trying to help, not hide." Poirot's voice cut through the noise. "Enough, Mies, Amos. Accusations are like stones, they sink the truth. Clara, tell me, what do you know of betrayal?" "In this family," Clara's face paled, her voice trembling. "Uncle wrote about it in his diary. He didn't trust Lionel, thought he'd sell the manor for his debts, and he worried about me because of Victor." Lionel laughed bitterly. "Me, you're the one with a criminal husband. Where's he hiding, Clara?" Japp stepped in, his voice gruff. "That's enough, Mr. Hawthorne. Poirot, what's this about Victor?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A man in the shadows, Inspector. Clara's husband, a gambler, perhaps a blackmailer. He knows of the locket and the fortune. We must find him." Japp nodded, sending constables to search the grounds again. Poirot turned to Clara, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle, you must be honest. Is Victor near?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know, Mr. Poirot. He sent a letter last week, demanding money. I burned it. I was ashamed." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "You did well to tell me. Stay with the constable. You are not safe." The day passed in a flurry of searches. Poirot and Hastings returned to the chapel, examining the altar's panel. The empty space suggested the killer had taken another clue, but the Latin note and Henry's letter were a step forward. Poirot studied the diary again, finding a mention of a rose-shaped candelabra in the dining room, tied to the code. He hurried there, finding the candelabra on the table, its brass arms curling like petals. A hidden catch revealed a small slot, but it was empty. "The killer, again," Poirot said, his face dark. "They know the manor's secrets. Hastings. Cursed. We're chasing ghosts, Poirot." "Nan," Poirot said, his eyes bright. "Ghosts leave no traces. The killer does." As evening fell, the manor grew colder, its halls filled with whispers. Poirot gathered the household, holding up the Latin note. The final step approaches, Mies Amos. The altar speaks, but so does betrayal. The killer is among us, and Hercule. Poirot will find them. Lionel glared, Clara shivered, Grayson stood silent, and Marlowe fidgeted. The shadows grew longer, but Poirot's little grey cells burned bright, ready to pierce the dark. Chapter 10. The trap. The evening shadows stretched long across Hawthorne Manor, their dark fingers creeping over the stone walls as if guarding the secrets within. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his black coat buttoned tightly, his sharp green eyes scanning the marble floor and the stern portraits of Hawthorne ancestors. In his pocket rested the golden locket, brass key, silver rose, brass disc, Latin notes, the clock tower map, and Sir Reginald's diary, each a piece of the intricate puzzle crafted by his father. The Latin clues, Rosa in lapide, celit verum, in umbris, hosa floret, perumbras, ad lucium, and subaltari veritas, translated to the rose in stone, hides the truth. In the shadows, the rose blooms, through the shadows to the light, and beneath the altar, the truth. The iron gear in the cellar and the empty pouch in the chapel's altar showed the killer was stealing clues. Staying one step ahead, Sir Reginald's murder by cyanide, the midnight attack on Grayson, and Clara's revelation about her husband, Victor, painted a web of danger. Poirot's mustache twitched as he devised a planner trap to lure the killer into the open. His little grey cells hummed with anticipation, ready to turn the hunter into the hunted. Monsieur Hastings, Poirot called, his voice crisp, but low, echoing in the quiet hall. Come, mon ami. Tonight we play a game with the shadows. Captain Hastings appeared from the drawing-room, his tweed jacket slightly rumpled, his brown hair messy from running his hands through it. He carried a cup of tea, his eyes bright with curiosity despite the late hour. Poirot, what's this about a game? He asked, setting his cup on a side table. You've got that look like you're about to catch a fox. Poirot's eyes gleamed, a faint smile on his lips. A fox, oui, Hastings. The killer is clever, but Hercule Poirot is cleverer. We set a trap. I will announce that I have solved the code, that the fortune's location will be revealed at dawn. The killer will act. They cannot resist. Hastings' eyes widened. You're baiting them. That's risky, Poirot. What if they come after you? Poirot chuckled softly, adjusting his tie. Risk is part of the game, mon ami. But Hercule Poirot does not walk blindly into danger. We will watch, we will wait, and we will catch our fox. Come, we gather the household. They moved to the drawing-room, where the fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of burning wood and tension. Clara Hawthorne sat near the hearth, her face pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Lionel Hawthorne paced by a window, his dark eyes flashing with frustration. Grayson, the butler, stood by the sideboard, his black suit immaculate despite the bandage on his forehead from the clock tower attack. Professor Marlowe sat in a corner, his nose in a book, but his hands fidgeted, betraying his nerves. Inspector Japp leaned against the doorframe, his notebook open, his moustache twitching with impatience. Mise Amos, Poirot said, his voice clear and commanding, drawing all eyes to him. Hercule Poirot has news. The code of the locketed is solved. At dawn, I will reveal the location of the fortune hidden by Henry Hawthorne. The truth of Sir Reginald's murder will follow. Clara gasped, her handkerchief falling. You've found it, the gold. Lionel stopped pacing, his face red. What? You're saying you know where it is. Prove it. Marlowe looked up, his glasses slipping. The code solved. How extraordinary. Grayson's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm. A bold claim, Mr. Poirot. Are you certain? Poirot smiled, his eyes sharp. Poirot is always certain. But I warn you, all the killer is among us. They will not like this news. Be vigilant tonight. Japp frowned, stepping forward. Poirot, you sure about this? You're stirring up a hornet's nest. Oui, Inspector, Poirot said, his voice low. And when the hornets fly, we see their sting. Post your constables and watch. Japp nodded, assigning men to guard the manor's exits. The household dispersed, their faces tense. Clara to her room, Lionel muttering angrily, Marlowe clutching his book, Grayson gliding silently away. Poirot and Hastings returned to Poirot's room, the locket and clues laid out on the desk. The candlelight flickered, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice soft but urgent, we prepare. The killer will come tonight. They cannot let me reveal the fortune's location. We guard my room, but we also watch the manor. Hastings nodded, his hand on his flashlight. I'm ready, Poirot. Where do we start? Poirot pointed to the window. We make it easy for them. Leave the curtains slightly open, the lock unlatched. They will try to enter here, thinking me asleep. You will hide in the wardrobe, I in the shadows by the door. We wait. They set the trap, the room dim save for a single candle. Hastings squeezed into the wardrobe, his flashlight off, his breathing slow. Poirot stood by the door, his small frame blending with the shadows, the locket in his hand. The manor was silent, the clock downstairs ticking like a heartbeat. Hours passed, the night growing colder, the air thick with anticipation. A faint scrape sounded at the window, then a soft click as the latch moved. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his body still. A figure slipped through, tall and cloaked, their movements quick but cautious. They crept toward the desk, reaching for the locket. Poirot stepped forward, his voice sharp. Bonsoir, monsieur. Or perhaps, mademoiselle, you come for the fortune, nan. The figure spun, a glint of metal in their hand a knife. They lunged, but Hastings burst from the wardrobe, tackling them to the floor. The knife skittered away, and the figure struggled, their hood falling back. It wasn't Victor, nor any of the households, just a man, his face unfamiliar, his eyes wild with fear. Who are you? Poirot demanded, his voice like steel. Hastings pinned the man's arms, his strength holding firm. The man panted, his voice rough. I'm nobody, hired to steal the locket. I don't know who. Japp burst in, alerted by the noise, his constable behind him. What's this? He barked, grabbing the man's collar. Another thief. Poirot's eyes narrowed, searching the man's coat. He found a glove, monogrammed with a V and a note. Take the locket, leave no trace, V. Poirot held up the glove, his voice calm but cutting. Victor, I presume. Where is he? The man shook his head, sweating. I don't know. He sent word through a middleman. Paid me to break in, that's all. Japp cuffed the man, dragging him to his feet. You're coming with us, lad. Poirot, this Victor's getting bold, oui, Poirot said, pocketing the glove and note. But this man is a pawn. The killer is still here, in the manor. They sent him to test us. Hastings frowned, brushing off his jacket. A pawn. So, Victor's behind it, but not the killer. Poirot nodded, his eyes bright. The killer uses Victor, or Victor uses them. We must find him. The household gathered in the drawing room, roused by the commotion. Clara's face was white, her hands trembling. Lionel cursed, his eyes darting to the glove. Grayson stood silently, his bandage stark against his pale face. Marlowe adjusted his glasses, his voice shaky a bricken. "This is madness." Poirot held up the glove, letting it catch the firelight. "This belongs to Victor, Clara's husband. He seeks the locket, but he is not alone. The killer plays a deeper game. Who among you knows Victor's whereabouts?" Clara shook her head, tears falling. "I swear, I don't know. He's not here." Lionel snorted. "Likely story. Your husband's a crook, Clara." Grayson spoke, his voice calm. "Sir, I've seen no strangers in the manor." Poirot's eyes locked onto him. "Yet strangers come, monsieur, and you see much, I think." Japp took the intruder to the village for questioning, leaving constables to guard the manor. Poirot and Hastings returned to the chapel at dawn, the rose window glowing softly. Poirot studied the altar, the Latin note sub altare veritas echoing in his mind. He pressed the brass disc into a slot, and a faint click sounded, but no panel opened. "The killer took the final piece," he murmured, "but the truth is near." Hastings paced, his boots scuffing the stone. "We're so close, Poirot." "What now?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "We think, Hastings. The locket, the rose, the altar, they point to one place. The killer cannot hide forever." As the day unfolded, the manor grew tenser, its shadows darker. Poirot sat in his room, the clues before him, the glove a new thread in the web. Victor was close, but the killer was closer. The little grey cells worked, ready to spring the final trap. Chapter 11. The final step. The dawn broke over Hawthorne Manor with a pale, hesitant light, as if the sun itself were reluctant to reveal the secrets hidden within the ancient stone walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his black coat buttoned tightly, his sharp green eyes scanning the marble floor and the stern portraits of Hawthorne ancestors. In his pocket rested the golden locket, brass key, silver rose, brass disc, Latin notes, the clock tower map, Sir Reginald's diary, and the monogrammed glove marked with a V for Victor, Clara's elusive husband. The Latin clues: Rosa in lapide celet, verum inumbris, husa floret parum brazad, and sub altari veritas, translated to the rose in stone hides the truth. In the shadows, the rose blooms, through the shadows to the light, and beneath the altar, the truth. The iron gear in the cellar, the empty pouch in the chapel, and the thwarted break-in last night proved the killer was desperate, always one step ahead. Sir Reginald's murder by cyanide, the attack on Grayson, and the mysterious figure of Victor wove a tangled web, but Poirot's little grey cells were ready to cut through it. The trap he set had drawn out a pawn, but the true killer was still in the manor, and today Poirot would unmask them. "Monsieur Hastings." Poirot called, his voice crisp but low, echoing in the quiet hall. "The hour is near. We end this game today." Captain Hastings appeared from the staircase, his tweed jacket slightly rumpled, his brown hair messy from a sleepless night. He carried a cup of tea, his eyes bright with anticipation despite the early hour. "Poirot, you sound like you've cracked it," he said, setting his cup on a side table. "That trap last night, did it work? Is Victor the killer?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile on his lips. "The trap, mon ami, showed us a shadow, but not the master. Victor is a piece of the puzzle, but the killer is close among those we see every day. We go to the chapel now. The altar holds the final truth." Hastings' eyes widened. The chapel again. That Latin note beneath the altar, the truth. "You think there's more there?" "Oui," Poirot said. his fingers brushing the pocket where the clues lay. The locket's numbers 1742, 8.2, a mechanism. The altar is the key. Come. They crossed the hall, the air cold and heavy with the scent of wax and old wood. The portraits watched, their painted eyes seeming to know the truth Poirot sought. The chapel was a short walk through the rose garden, its stone walls damp with morning dew, the stained glass rose window glowing faintly in the grey light. The air smelled of earth and roses, and the silence was thick, broken only by the soft crunch of their boots on the gravel path. Inside the chapel, the 8 pews stood in neat rows, their wood polished but worn. The altar loomed at the front, its stone surface marked by the faint groove where Poirot had inserted the brass disc the day before. He knelt, his gloved hands tracing the edges, his eyes sharp. "Hastings," he said, "help me move the altar. The truth lies beneath." Hastings rolled up his sleeves, and together they pushed, the heavy stone grinding against the floor. A low rumble echoed, and a hidden trapdoor appeared, its edges etched with a rose. Poirot inserted the brass key from the first clue, and the lock clicked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. The final step. Hastings grabbed his flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. "A vault, Poirot. This must be where the fortune is." They descended, the air growing colder, smelling of damp stone and rust. The staircase ended in a small chamber, its walls lined with stone roses, their petals carved with precision. At the center stood a locked iron chest, its surface etched with the locket's numbers 17, 42, 8 and a slot shaped like the silver rose. Poirot inserted the rose, and the chest clicked open, revealing a pile of gold coins, glittering in the flashlight's beam, and a final note in Henry Hawthorne's handwriting: "To my heir, the true heart finds the gold. Beware the traitor." Within, Hastings gasped, his eyes wide. "The fortune, Poirot, we found it." Poirot's face was grave. But the killer seeks this, too. We must act quickly." They took a handful of coins and the note, locking the chest and ceiling. The trapdoor. As they emerged into the chapel, a shout rang out from the manor. Inspector Japp ran toward them, his face red with urgency. "Poirot, trouble in the drawing room. Lionel and Clara are at it, and it's bad." They hurried back, the manors, halls buzzing with tension. In the drawing room, Lionel stood by the fireplace, his face flushed, shouting at Clara, who sat pale and trembling, a letter clutched in her hand. Grayson stood by the sideboard, his bandage stark against his calm face. Professor Marlowe was in a corner, his book forgotten, his eyes darting nervously. "You're hiding him," Lionel yelled, pointing at Clara. "Your husband's the killer, and you know it." Clara stood, her voice shaking but sharp. "That's a lie. I haven't seen Victor in months." "You're the one who wanted Uncle's money." Japp stepped between them, his hands raised. "Enough, Poirot. What's going on?" Poirot held up the new note, his voice clear and commanding. "Mies, Amos, the fortune is found beneath the chapel's altar. But the killer is here, among us. This note warns of a traitor within. I know who it is." All eyes turned to him, the room silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Clara's hands trembled, Lionel's face reddened, Grayson stood still, and Marlowe adjusted his glasses. Poirot stepped forward, his eyes like daggers. "The killer is clever, but not clever enough. They poisoned Sir Reginald with cyanide, left coins to mislead us, struck Grayson to hide their tracks, and sent a pawn to steal the locket. But one clue betrays them. He produced the monogrammed glove, its V glinting in the firelight. This glove, found on the intruder, points to Victor. But Victor is not here. Someone used his name, his shadow, to confuse us. The cyanide was in Sir Reginald's water, given at night. Only one person had access. Only one moved silently. Only one knew the manor's secrets. Grayson's eyes flickered, but his face remained calm. "Mr. Poirot, you cannot mean we, Grayson," Poirot said, his voice like steel. "You are the killer. You served the water. You knew the passages. You attacked yourself in the tower to cast suspicion elsewhere. You used Victor's name, planting the glove to frame him. But your calm is too perfect, your eyes too sharp. Hercule Poirot sees through your mask." Clara gasped, Lionel cursed, and Marlowe dropped his book. Grayson stepped back, his face pale. "You have no proof," he said, his voice low. Poirot smiled, pulling a small vial from his pocket. "This, found in your quarters, smells of almond cyanide. You hid it poorly, monsieur, and the diary Sir Reginald wrote of your sharp eyes, your questions about the locket. You sought the fortune for yourself." Japp grabbed Grayson's arm, his voice gruff. "You're under arrest, Grayson. Anything to say?" Grayson's calm cracked, his eyes wild. "I served him for years. He promised me nothing. The gold was mine by right." Clara sobbed, Lionel stared, and Marlowe shook his head. Japp cuffed Grayson, leading him away. Poirot turned to the others, his voice gentle. "The code is solved, the fortune found, the killer caught. Hercule Poirot has kept his promise." Hastings clapped Poirot's shoulder. "You did it, old chap. But what about Victor?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Victor is a ghost, Hastings, a name used by Grayson to hide his guilt. The glove was his, monogrammed to mislead. The case is closed." The manor sighed, its shadows lighter now. The fortune was secured, the truth revealed, and Poirot's little grey cells rested, victorious. Chapter 12. The shadows fade. The morning sun broke through the heavy clouds over Hawthorne Manor, casting a warm golden glow on its ancient stone walls, as if the house itself sighed in relief after days of darkness. Hercule Poirot stood in the rose garden, his black coat buttoned neatly, his sharp green eyes taking in the dew-kissed petals and the stone rose statue that had guarded the first clue. In his pocket rested the golden locket, brass key, silver rose, brass disc, Latin notes, the clock tower map, Sir Reginald's diary, and the monogrammed glove, marked with a V, the tools that had unravelled the mystery of Sir Reginald's murder and the hidden fortune, the Latin clues. Rosa in lapide, celit verum, ingumbris, husa florit perumbras, ad lucem, and sub altari veritas, had led to the vault beneath the chapel's altar, where the gold was found. Grayson, the butler, had been unmasked as the killer, his greed and betrayal exposed by Poirot's little grey cells. The manor was quieter now, its shadows lighter, but questions lingered about Clara's husband. Victor, the future of the fortune, and the scars left on the Hawthorne family. Poirot's moustache twitched as he heard footsteps on the gravel path, signalling the approach of someone eager to speak. "Monsieur Hastings," Poirot called, his voice crisp but warm, carrying through the still air. "Come, mon ami, the case is closed, but the story is not yet finished." Captain Hastings appeared from the manor's back door, his tweed jacket slightly wrinkled, his brown hair tousled by the morning breeze. He carried a steaming cup of tea, his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a solved mystery. "Poirot, you're up early," he said, sipping his tea. "I thought you'd be sleeping after last night's big reveal. Grayson in cuffs. The gold found quite a show." Poirot smiled, his eyes gleaming. "Sleep is for those without puzzles, Hastings. The killer is caught, the fortune secured. But the heart of Hawthorne Manor still beats. We must see to its people, Clara, Lionel, Marlowe, and the shadow of Victor." Hastings nodded, setting his cup on a garden bench. "Clara's been quiet since Grayson's arrest, and Lionel's still fuming, probably about the gold. What about Victor? Was he really just a name Grayson used?" Poirot's fingers brushed the pocket where the glove lay. "A question, mon ami, that we will answer today. Come, we join the others in the drawing room." They walked through the rose garden, the air fresh with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. The manor's walls loomed, but the oppressive weight of secrets seemed lifted. The portraits of Hawthorne ancestors less stern in the morning light. The drawing room was warm, the fire crackling softly, its glow casting a cozy light on the heavy curtains and polished furniture. Clara Hawthorne sat by the hearth, her dark hair neatly pinned, her face pale but calmer, her hands still in her lap for the first time in days. Lionel Hawthorne stood by a window, his arms crossed, his dark eyes less angry but still restless. Professor Marlowe sat in a corner, his glasses polished, a book open but unread, his face thoughtful. Inspector Japp leaned against the sideboard, his notebook closed, his moustache twitching with a mix of relief and curiosity. "Mr. Poirot," Clara said, standing as he entered, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you, you've saved us saved." "The manor," Poirot bowed slightly, his smile kind. "Mademoiselle Hercule Poirot serves justice. The truth is found, but your uncle's legacy remains. What will you do with it?" Clara glanced at Lionel, then back to Poirot. "Oh, the gold. It's more than I ever imagined. I want to honor Uncle's wishes, keep the manor, restore it, maybe. Open it to the village as a museum. He loved this place." Lionel snorted, but his voice was softer than before. "A museum. You'll waste it, Clara. I say we sell the lot, pay off debts, live a little." Clara's eyes flashed. "Your debts? You mean Uncle wanted the manor to stand, not be sold for your gambling?" Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff. "Easy, you two. The gold's under guard until the estate's settled. Poirot, what's this about Victor? That glove you found any more on him?" Poirot produced the glove, its V catching the firelight. "Victor is a ghost, Inspector, but a real one. Grayson used his name to mislead us, planting the glove on the intruder. But Clara's letters from Victor, burned or not, prove he exists. He is a gambler, a blackmailer, and he knows of the locket. I believe he is near, watching." Marlowe looked up, his voice hesitant. I can confirm that, Mr. Poirot. Victor contacted me months ago, demanding payment for old debts. I never saw him, but his letters were clear he wanted the fortune." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you did not tell us, monsieur. Why?" Marlowe's hands shook. "I was ashamed. I thought if I helped solve the code, I could pay him off, avoid trouble." Clara's face paled. "Victor's letters to me said the same. He threatened to come here, to take what was his. I burned them to forget, but I'm still scared." Poirot nodded, his voice gentle but firm. "Fear not, Clara. Hercule Poirot has set another trap. The village constables are searching for Victor. Guided by the gloves tailor a shop in London known to him. He will not escape. Hastings grinned, leaning forward. Another trap, Poirot. You're full of surprises. Poirot's mustache twitched. Surprises, oui, but method, always. The locket's code was a path through shadows, but the killer's heart was darker. Grayson's greed led him to poison Sir Reginald, to steal clues, to strike himself to cast suspicion, but he could not outwit Hercule Poirot. Japp chuckled, scratching his mustache. You've got a knack, Poirot. That vault under the altar hound, you know. Poirot smiled, his eyes bright. The Latin inspector told the story. Sub altare veritas, beneath the altar. The truth. The locket's numbers 1742. 8 matched the pews, the disc, the gear. Each clue was a rose, leading to the heart of the manor. Henry Hawthorne built a puzzle to protect his gold, but also to test his heirs. Clara, you are the true heart he spoke of. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. Thank you, Mr. Poirot. I'll make Uncle proud. Lionel sighed, his shoulders slumping. Fine, Clara, keep your museum. But I want my share, fair and square. Marlowe stood, his voice soft. I'll leave the manor, Mr. Poirot. My work here is done, and my debts, I'll face them. Poirot nodded, his voice kind. Face them with courage, monsieur. The truth sets us free. The day unfolded quietly. The manor bathed in a rare calm. Japp's constables returned with news. Victor had been found in a nearby village, hiding in a tavern. He confessed to sending the intruder, but denied any part in the murder, claiming Grayson had paid him to stir trouble. The glove was indeed his, stolen by Grayson to frame him. Victor was taken to London for questioning. His shadow lifted from Clara's heart as evening fell. Poirot and Hastings walked through the rose garden, the sun setting in a blaze of red and gold. The stone rose statue stood proud, its secrets revealed. Hastings sipped a fresh cup of tea, his face content. Quite a case, Poirot. You solved it like a maestro. Poirot smiled, his eyes warm. A puzzle is like a symphony, Hastings. Each note, each clue, must play in harmony. Hercule Poirot merely conducts. They returned to the manor, its halls brighter, its shadows faded. Clara stood at the door, her face lit with hope. Mr. Poirot, will you stay for dinner? The manor owes you so much. Poirot bowed, his mustache twitching. Mercy, mademoiselle. But Hercule Poirot has other puzzles waiting. The world is full of shadows, and I must bring them light. As they left, the manor stood tall, its roses blooming, its secrets laid bare. The fortune was safe, the killer caught, and Poirot's little grey cells rested, ready for the next mystery. Chapter 13. The Threat in the Shadows. The autumn wind swept through the rose garden of Hawthorne Manor, rustling the petals and carrying a chill that seemed to whisper of new secrets. Hercule Poirot stood on the gravel path, his black coat buttoned tightly against the breeze, his sharp green eyes scanning the stone rose statue that had once held the first clue to the Hawthorne fortune. It had been a month since he unmasked Grayson, the butler, as Sir Reginald's murderer, solving the cipher of the golden locket and uncovering the gold hidden beneath the chapel's altar. The Latin clues rosa, in lapide, salit farum ingumbris, husa floret, perumbras, ad luciem, and sub altari veritas, had led to the vault. and Clara Hawthorne had vowed to use the fortune to preserve the manor as a museum. Victor, Clara's husband, had been caught, a petty blackmailer but no killer. Yet, as Poirot gazed at the manor's towering walls, he sensed the shadows were not done with this place. A letter, delivered to Clara that morning, had brought him back a single page, written in jagged ink, threatening to burn the manor if the gold was not shared. Poirot's moustache twitched as his little grey cells stirred, ready for a new puzzle. "Monsieur Hastings," Poirot called, his voice crisp but warm, cutting through the wind. "We have work to do. The manor calls Hercule Poirot once more." Captain Hastings appeared from the manor's back door, his tweed jacket flapping, his brown hair tousled by the gusts. He carried a steaming cup of tea, his eyes bright with the thrill of a new adventure. "Poirot, you're back already," he said, sipping his tea. "I thought we'd have a break after Grayson. What's this about a letter?" Poirot produced the letter from his pocket, its paper creased but sharp, the words scrawled in black. "Ink, the gold belongs to all. Give it up, or the manor burns." He handed it to Hastings, his eyes gleaming. "A threat, mon ami. Someone knows of the fortune and wants it. Clara is frightened, and Hercule Poirot does not leave a lady in distress." Hastings frowned, reading the letter. "Burn the manor. That's bold. Think it's Victor again, trying to scare Clara." Poirot shook his head, his fingers brushing the locket, now kept in Clara's care but shown to him upon his arrival. "Nan, Hastings, Victor is in custody, his schemes petty. This is someone new, or perhaps someone we know, hiding in plain sight. We begin in the drawing room, where the household waits." They walked through the garden, the roses drooping under the autumn chill, their scent faint but lingering. The manor's stone walls loomed, less oppressive now but still heavy with history. The grand hall was warm, its marble floor polished, the portraits of Hawthorne ancestors softened by the morning light. In the drawing room the fire crackled, casting a golden glow on the heavy curtains and oak furniture. Clara sat by the hearth, her dark hair neatly pinned, her face pale but resolute, the threatening letter on her lap. Lionel Hawthorne leaned against a window, his arms crossed, his dark eyes restless but less angry than before. Professor Marlowe, who had stayed to catalogue the manor's library for Clara's museum, sat in a corner, his glasses fogged, a book open but unread. Inspector Japp stood by the sideboard, his notebook out, his moustache twitching with irritation. "Mr. Poirot," Clara said, standing, her voice steady despite her pale cheeks. "Thank you for coming so quickly. This letter, it came this morning. Slipped under the door. I don't know who could hate us so much." Poirot bowed slightly, his smile kind but sharp. "Mademoiselle Hercule Poirot serves justice, always. This letter is a shadow, but shadows have sources. May I see where it was found?" Clara nodded, leading them to the front door. The letter had been pushed under the heavy oak, its edges slightly damp from the morning dew. Poirot knelt, his gloved hands examining the floor. A faint smudge of mud marked the threshold, fresh and gritty, with a hint of red clay not found in the manor's garden. "Interesting," he murmured. "This mud is not local. The writer comes from afar, or wishes us to think so." Hastings leaned over, his flashlight sweeping the floor. "Red clay, there's a quarry a few miles away, isn't there? Could be from there." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, mon ami, but we do not jump like the frog. We observe, we think. Let us speak with the household." They returned to the drawing room, where Japp was questioning Lionel. "You've seen anyone strange around, Mr. Hawthorne?" Japp asked, his voice gruff. "This letter's no prank." Lionel shrugged, his face tense. "Nobody. The manor's been quiet since Grayson. I've been in the village, sorting my debts. Clara's the one with the gold now. She's the target." Clara's eyes flashed. "Don't start, Lionel. I'm not giving up Uncle's legacy. The manor stays." Marlowe looked up, his voice hesitant. "The letter, it could be someone from the village." The fortune's news spread fast after the arrest. People talk. Poirot's eyes narrowed, locking onto Marlowe. "You know the village, monsieur. Have you heard whispers of this threat?" Marlowe shook his head, his hands fidgeting. "No. But I've seen men at the tavern talking about the manor. They're jealous, maybe angry." Japp frowned, scribbling in his notebook. "I'll check the tavern. Poirot, what's your plan?" Poirot held up the letter, its jagged words catching the firelight. "This is no idle threat, Inspector. The writer knows the manor, its secrets. They speak of the gold, which only a few know was found. We searched the grounds, the village, and the manor's hidden places. The locket may hold another clue." Clara gasped, producing the locket from a small box. "I kept it safe, Mr. Poirot. Do you think it's tied to this?" Poirot took the locket, its gold warm in his hand. The numbers 17, 42, 8 etched clearly. He opened it, studying the rose engraving inside. "The locket led us to the fortune, but perhaps it hides more. Henry Hawthorne was clever. We return to the chapel where the code began." They left the drawing room, the manor's halls quiet but heavy with new tension. The chapel's rose window glowed softly, its red and gold petals casting a warm shadow on the stone floor. Poirot knelt by the altar where the vault had been found, his fingers tracing the groove where the brass disc had fit. "The Latin clues ended here," he said, "but threats do not come without purpose. We search for a new mark." Hastings swept his flashlight across the altar, noticing a faint scratch, fresh and deliberate, near the base. "Poirot, look. Someone's been here since we left." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined the scratch, finding a small slot hidden beneath a loose stone. He inserted the silver rose, and a click echoed, revealing a tiny compartment. Inside was a folded note, its paper new, unlike the aged clues of Henry Hawthorne. It read, "The gold is cursed. Share it or lose all." Hastings frowned. "Cursed, that's not like the other clues. Someone's playing a new game." Poirot nodded. Pocketing the note, "We Hastings? This is no work of Henry Hawthorne. The killer Grayson is gone, but another seeks to profit. We must find them." They returned to the manor, where Japp was organizing a search of the grounds. The village constables reported no sign of Victor, confirming he remained in custody. But a new lead emerged. A villager had seen a stranger near the manor's gates, tall and cloaked, carrying a satchel. The description matched the intruder from the previous case, but the man was in jail. "A copycat, perhaps," Poirot murmured, his mind racing. The day passed in a blur of investigation. Poirot and Hastings searched the manor's hidden passages, finding no new clues but noting disturbed dust in the cellar, as if someone had passed recently. In the library, Marlowe helped catalogue books, but avoided Poirot's gaze, his hands still shaky. Clara worked with village officials to plan the museum, her resolve firm despite the threat. Lionel stayed in his room, claiming a headache, but Poirot suspected he was hiding something. As evening fell, the manor grew colder, its shadows deeper. Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room, holding up the new note. "Mies Amos," he said, his voice clear. "A new threat rises. The gold draws greed, and greed draws danger. This note was left in the chapel by someone who knows the manor's secrets. Speak now, if you know anything." Clara shook her head, her voice steady. "I swear, Mr. Poirot, I've told you everything. The gold will help the village, not harm." "It," Lionel snorted, "help the village. You're dreaming, Clara. Someone wants their cut, and they'll burn this place to get it." Marlowe spoke, his voice soft. "The note's stylets, not like the Latin clues. It's modern, angry, perhaps a villager, or someone who worked here." Poirot's eyes locked onto him. "You notice much, monsieur. Have you seen this cloaked stranger?" Marlowe paled. "No, I just heard the rumors." Japp interrupted, his face grim. "Poirot, we found something in the garden, red clay, near the wall, and a cigarette stub. Not local tobacco." Poirot's moustache twitched. "The clay. Again, we are close, Inspector. Tonight, we watch the manor. The threat will come." They set a new trap, posting constables in the shadows, Poirot and Hastings in the chapel. The night was silent, the rose window dark. A rustle sounded near the altar, and Poirot's hand tightened on his cane. A figure emerged, cloaked, their hands gloved. "Stop," Poirot shouted, his voice echoing. The figure froze, then bolted. But Hastings tackled them, revealing a young man, his face unfamiliar, his satchel spilling papers. One was a map of the manor, marked with the chapel. "I was hired," he gasped. "A man in the village," he said, to scare Clara, nothing more. Japp cuffed him, his voice gruff. "Who hired you?" The man shook his head, didn't give a name. "Paid in cash, said the manor owed him." Chapter 14. The light of truth, the autumn wind howled around Hawthorne Manor, rattling the windows and stirring the roses in the garden, as if urging the old house to surrender its final secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his black coat buttoned tightly against the morning chill, his sharp green eyes scanning the marble floor and the portraits of Hawthorne ancestors, their painted gazes softened by the resolution of Sir Reginald's murder. The golden locket, brass key, silver rose, brass disc, Latin notes, clock tower map, Sir Reginald's diary, and the monogrammed glove marked with a V had led to the discovery of the fortune beneath the chapel's altar and the unmasking of Grayson as the killer. But a new threat had emerged, jagged letter demanding the gold or threatening to burn the manor, followed by a cloaked stranger's attempt to scare Clara, caught in the chapel last night. The stranger, a hired pawn, had pointed to a mysterious figure in the village, and Poirot's little grey cells were alight, ready to unmask the mastermind and end the saga of Hawthorne Manor. "Monsieur Hastings," Poirot called, his voice crisp but warm, echoing through the hall. "The final act begins, mon ami. Today we banish the shadows for good." Captain Hastings appeared from the staircase, his tweed jacket slightly rumpled, his brown hair tousled by the wind from an open window. He carried a steaming cup of tea, his eyes bright with the thrill of closing another case. "Poirot, you're up early," he said, sipping his tea. "That fellow we caught last night, he's just a hired hand, isn't he? Who's pulling the strings?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile on his lips as he held up the threatening letter, its jagged words stark in the morning light. "A puppet we, Hastings, but every puppet has a master. The letter, the stranger, the red clay, they point to someone close, someone who knows the manor's secrets. We gather the household, and Hercule Poirot will reveal the truth. Hastings set his cup on a side table, his grin wide. Another big reveal. You never disappoint, Poirot. Let's get to it. They moved to the drawing room, where the fire crackled, casting a warm glow on the heavy curtains and polished oak furniture. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and the tension of anticipation. Clara Hawthorne sat by the hearth, her dark hair neatly pinned, her face pale but resolute, her hands steady as she clutched a shawl. Lionel Hawthorne leaned against a window, his arms crossed, his dark eyes restless but curious. His earlier anger softened by the prospect of keeping his share of the fortune. Professor Marlowe sat in a corner, his glasses polished, a book open, but ignored, his fingers tapping nervously. Inspector Japp stood by the sideboard, his notebook ready, his moustache twitching with impatience. Mr. Poirot, Clara said, standing, her voice firm despite the strain of the past days. The constables told me about the man in the chapel. Is he the one who sent the letter? Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes kind but piercing. Mademoiselle, the man is a tool, hired to frighten you. But Hercule Poirot sees through such tricks. The mastermind is near, and today we end their game. Lionel snorted, but his tone was less sharp. Another game. I thought we were done with this nonsense. Who's after the gold now? Marlowe looked up, his voice shaky. The village is buzzing, Mr. Poirot. People know about the fortune. It could be anyone. Japp nodded, his voice gruff. We've got the stranger in custody, but he's not talking much. Says a man paid him in the tavern, didn't give a name. Poirot, what's your angle? Poirot held up the new note from the chapel. Its words, the gold is cursed. Share it, or lose all glinting in the firelight. This note, Mies Amos, is no work of Henry Hawthorne. It is modern, angry, written by someone who knows the manor's secrets. The red clay on the stranger's boots, the cigarette stub, they come from the quarry, yes, but also from a place closer. We search the manor's attic today, where old secrets hide. Clara frowned, her hands tightening on her shawl. The attic. It's just old furniture and dust. Why there? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Because, mademoiselle, the attic overlooks the garden where the stranger entered. Dust does not lie, and neither does Hercule Poirot. They left the drawing room, climbing the manor's creaky stairs to the attic. A vast space filled with cobwebs, trunks, and forgotten relics. The air was musty, smelling of old wood and mildew, the windows small and grimy, letting in slivers of light. Poirot's gloved hands moved carefully, lifting lids and shifting crates. Hastings swept his flashlight across the floor, noticing disturbed dust near a window overlooking the rose garden. Poirot, look here. Footprints, fresh ones, and more red clay. Poirot knelt, examining the prints. Hastings. Someone stood here, watching the garden, perhaps planning the threat. And here he pointed to a small crate, its lid ajar, revealing a bundle of papers and a cigarette case, its surface scratched but marked with a faint L. Lionel, Hastings whispered, his eyes wide. He smokes, doesn't he? Poirot's moustache twitched. Perhaps, but we do not leap. The case is old, the papers new. Let us see. The papers were letters, written in the same jagged hand as the threatening note, addressed to C.H. Clara Hawthorne. They demanded a share of the gold, signed, only with an X. One mentioned the manor's passages, known only to those close to the family. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The mastermind is no stranger, Hastings. They are here, among us. They returned to the drawing room, the papers, and cigarette case in hand. Japp was questioning the stranger again, who sat cuffed in a corner, his face sullen. Poirot held up the letters, his voice clear and commanding. Mise à miss, the threat is unmasked. These letters, found in the attic, match the one sent to Clara. They speak of the manor's secrets, known only to a few. The red clay, the cigarette stub, they point to someone who moves freely here. Lionel stepped forward, his face red. You're not pointing at me, are you? I've been in my room. Clara's eyes widened, staring at the cigarette case. That's not Lionel's. It's old, from Uncle's time. I've seen it in his study. Marlowe adjusted his glasses, his voice trembling. It could belong to anyone, Mr. The village is full of smokers. Poirot's smile was sharp. Non, monsieur. This case belongs to one who knows the manor's heart. The letters are signed X, but the hand betrays them. Professor Marlowe, you wrote these. Marlowe paled, his book slipping to the floor. Me, that's absurd. I'm a scholar, not a criminal. Poirot stepped closer, his eyes like daggers. You are a scholar with debts, monsieur. You admitted to owing Victor, but you lied about the rest. You stayed to catalogue the library, but you searched for more gold secrets, power. The cigarette case is yours, dropped in the attic where you planned your threats. The red clay is from your walks to the quarry, where you met the stranger to hire him. You used X to hide, but Hercule Poirot sees through shadows. Clara gasped, Lionel cursed, and Japp grabbed Marlowe's arm. Is this true, Professor? Shoulders sagged, his face defeated. I needed the money. The fortune was so close, and Clara wouldn't share. I thought a scare would make her give it up. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Japp cuffed him, his voice gruff. You're coming with us, Marlowe. Threatening arson's no small crime. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. Why, Professor? I trusted you. Marlowe looked away, his voice soft. I'm sorry, Clara. Greed got the better of me. Poirot turned to the others, his voice gentle. The manor is safe now, Mise à miss. The fortune is yours, Clara, to honour. Sir Reginald's dream. Lionel, your debts can be paid, but learn from this. The shadows are gone. Lionel nodded, his face softer. I'll try, Poirot. Clara, let's make this place right. Clara smiled, wiping her eyes. We will, Lionel, for Uncle. The manor settled into a quiet peace, the wind softer now, the roses brighter. Poirot and Hastings walked through the garden one last time, the stone statue gleaming in the sunlight. Hastings sipped a fresh cup of tea, his face content. Another triumph, Poirot. You caught the snake in the grass. Poirot's eyes twinkled. A snake, oui, but Hercule Poirot is the mongoose. The manor is free, and my little grey cells can rest. As they left, the manor stood tall, its secrets laid bare, its future bright. Clara waved from the door, her heart light, the fortune safe, and the shadows of Hawthorne Manor faded at last.